Hello, YouTube. This is G Checker. Well, I guess anybody that subscribes to my channel knows who I am. But I have a special guest by the name of LJ, and he's my friend on Facebook. And we've been having a dialogue back and forth about Deuteronomy 28 and specifically 68. And does the Bible speak on the biblical Israelites being blacks? And LJ, he has something he wants to say. Well, this whole dialogue is going to basically be about the Israelites being black and what color are the Israelites. And then there would be one more topic that we might be able to get into, and that topic would be, are the Israelites in the land of Israel today? So with that being said, I'll let LJ introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Okay, so my name's LJ. I'm from England, but I'm living in the Czech Republic at the moment. As Lamont said, I'm chatting to him on Facebook about the Israelites and the color of them and what the Bible actually says regarding the color. So this is going to be a conversation, hopefully just dealing with the biblical texts and dealing with what color the Bible says the Israelites are.
Okay, so there you have it. So basically, we kind of wanted to go through Deuteronomy 28, and okay, well, let me ask you this, LJ. I guess you have some color verses that you had singled out. So do you want to go through those first before we get into Deuteronomy 28?
Or, I think the Deuteronomy 28 is fundamental to the Hebrew Israelite argument, but I think that only works if the Israelites are black, because if they're not black, then Deuteronomy 28 would not apply to them. So I think what we need to do is go through the texts that are commonly used by the Hebrew Israelites to prove that the Israelites are black. So I'm happy to start with any verse that you would like to bring up, which maybe you think is one of the strongest verse, or we can start off with some easy ones. Completely up to you.
Well, I really don't use the color verses like that, but I'm pretty familiar with the color verses. So let's see. I guess we could start off with what is it? Limitation, is it 4 and 7 or 4 and 8?
Lamentations 4 and 8, yeah. Well, Lamentations 4, 7, 4, 8, yeah.
Okay, give me a second. And then I will screen share once I pull this up. All right, let's see here.
Yeah, so we've got Lamentations 4, 7, which leads into 4, 8. The 4:8 passage is the one where the word black or blacker is used, as in their visage is blacker than coal. So this is obviously used to say that the Israelites are their look is black.
Right. Okay, and that is a verse that we use quite often, because when you look at visage, and let's just get the definition of visage. And as you see, you would see I guess shape, form, outline, figure, and appearance. So so the appearance is basically what we the Israelites tend to cleave to, because that helps us further our case. Like I said, I don't really use the color verses as much, The ones that I do use are Ruddy and Adam and stuff like that. But since we're here, let's look at
We
some.
we can certainly deal with those is as well, with Ruddy and what color Adam would be. That's not a problem, but
Right, and then right here you have blacker than coal,
yeah.
and right here is saying to be dark or to be or grow dark, to have a dark color, to grow dim, and let's see, to make dark cause to be dark. And I guess we could look at some of the ways that it's being used in scripture. So let me go down and see. 'Cause I haven't really studied this much, but let's see. Well, if you look at Exodus 10 and 15, for they covered the face of the whole earth so that the land was darkened. So here you see that the land was actually darkened. And if you look at the next verse of Job 3 and 9, let the stars of the twilight thereof be dark. Let it look for light, but have none. Neither
Hmm.
let it see the dawning of the day. So these are actually dark verses, and I'll see if I see anything about anything else referencing to skin. Let's see. Well, no, I don't see anything else about the skin being darkened, but I guess to
Hmm.
be black. And when you look at the verse before, you would see what is it? Let me go to it.
Yeah, the her Lamentations 4:7. Her Nazarites were purer than snow; they were whiter than milk. They were more ruddy in body than rubies. Their polishing was of sapphire. Okay, so in this verse, the Nazarites were described as being white, whiter than milk. They were purer than snow. They were more ruddy. So this verse, we need to look at what this is going to lead us into the word ruddy, anyway. But the word in verse 8, meaning that they became black. So we have to look at where what they were and what they became. So they were described as being white, but becoming black. So here the verse is clearly saying that they changed in their appearance,
Right.
but the color has it's got nothing to do with ruddy in the blacker verse. So we have two different colors here. We have white and we have they became black. They grew dark.
Right.
So which means that they were not dark to start with. But we also have the word ruddy, which obviously we need to deal with. But their bodies were ruddy.
Okay.
So for me, this verse is not saying that they started off black but became black. And I'm not also positive that this is describing the skin color. Anyway,
Okay. So you're saying that Lamentations you don't think is describing the skin color?
it's
Verses 6, well, verses 7 and 8. You don't believe either one of those are
well,
describing skin color?
well, we are talking about the color of the color, but I mean we've got here that they're whiter than milk. I don't believe that they were whiter than milk. Just like I don't believe that they were blacker than coal. It's descriptive of the fact that they were in their bodies light but became darker. We also so you need to put this into context of why they became uh, dark. What is it that made them dark? Lamentations is all about the crying out to God at the time that the Israelites were struggling with famine that God had brought about. That there was a famine which was brought about through a great heat. That God had stopped the rain from coming. The heat was immense, and so they started off as a lighter color, but due to and uh, the famine that was going on, they became dark. This is to do with the sun that they became dark. This is not the fact that they were white and they became black.
Okay,
This is becoming a darker in color.
okay, so do you think Lamentation 4 and 6 or 4 and 7 is speaking about skin tone, and then verses 8 is saying that they grew darker as in skin tone?
It is, yes, but is it saying that they were white, pure white, and saying that they were pure black? No, it's just describing the what is happening is just as like anybody that is going out in the sun, they're becoming darker, and it's to do with the fact that the immense heat that is being brought about by the famine. It is we are dealing with the skin color, but we're not dealing with somebody that is starting off as a white person and turning into a black person.
So when it say they were whiter than milk, what does
Yeah,
pure than snow and whiter than milk? Let's deal with that, because we know Nazarites basically took a vow,
yeah,
and that vow, it was basically to maintain a certain purity and
yeah,
and to maintain cleanness, and to live that for either a certain amount of time, and some were to live that lifestyle for life. So
mhm.
now that we know that they're purer than snow and they were whiter than milk, are you still thinking? You did say that you don't think this verse is speaking about skin tone.
It's not specifically talking about skin tone. We do have obviously I've tried to steer away from the fact of ruddy because that's going to lead us down into this a study into what ruddy actually means, and I don't want to go down there quite yet. I agree that the white of the milk is also describing the fact that their purity, but what I've tried, like I said, I've tried to steer away from the ruddy part. Their bodies were described as being ruddy, more ruddy than rubies. Now rubies are red,
Right.
so so we have to we're going to have to go into the ruddy at some point, obviously. But I didn't really want to go into it that quickly. The thing is, if I know that this is another verse, but it does link in, and that's Lamentations 5 and 10, where the Israelite skin is described as being black like an oven, and this is all in the same context. It's if you read Lamentations 5 and 10, it says our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. So in this verse, it's clearly telling us that because of the famine, the skin became dark, became black. And if I bear me 1 second. I need to find that verse because the word for black there um, actually means hot. It doesn't mean the color. It means because of the heat that the blackness is from the heat and not from the color.
Right here on the biblical usage is saying that to yearn, be kindled, be black or hot, grow warm and tender, be or
Yeah,
grow hot, become hot,
to
become
become hot.
emotion. Right.
It's Yeah, it's in, and the verse clearly states that it's because of the terrible famine, the heat that was being applied to the land, that the Israelites were under. It's got nothing to do with actual color. The color is shahar, is black, is a completely different word. That's not what is being used in this verse. These two verses are not talking about the skin color. It's talking about the effects of what is happening through the famine
Okay.
and
Well, you know,
through the heat.
and
We're not talking about a black person or a white person in this verse. It's got no reference to a person being black or white or becoming from white to black. It's got to do with the fact that there was a famine, a heat, and the people are becoming dark through that. It's got nothing to do with whether a person was white or black to start with.
okay. Alrighty, and let's see here. And you said that okay. Let's see. Let's go to Song of Solomon because I think you said the Hebrew word is shahar.
For black, yeah.
Yep, you're right, Shakur. So yeah, I do see the difference there, as in the biblical usage because
Which verse are we talking about in Song of Solomon? Are we talking 1:5 or are we talking 5:10?
we're talking about 1 and 5.
1 and 5.
Yeah,
And
and I would say let's go to 5:10. I think 5 and 10 is the same thing, but I will get back to Lamentations 4 and 7 here shortly.
yeah.
Let's see here. Limitations, yeah, and yeah. So this is basically saying my beloved is white and ruddy, the chiefest
Mm-hmm.
among 10,000. So I can understand how someone and there's a certain Israelite group out there that is in Britain, and they subscribe to a lot of these verses that have something to do with the white skin tone, or you know
Mm-hmm.
the Caucasian skin tone. So this is like one of the verses that they use, and they look at my beloved as white and ruddy. They think the white is the white skin, the fair skin, and they think the ruddiness is like when you blush, like they say when you get shy or you blush, your skin turns like a rosy color, and
Mm-hmm.
they're saying no other race can do that but the white
Mm-hmm.
race. But
I,
right
I,
here,
I, yeah, I don't use that. I don't use the verse in that in that way. But I am aware that some people do use that in that way. But
right.
that's not what I think the verse is talking about. But
Right. So once we, because when you go on through verse 11, you'll see. Well, let's start at verse 10 and 5 and 10. All right, my beloved is white and ruddy. So now you have two different colors, white and ruddy. The
mm-hmm.
chiefest among 10,000. His
Mm-hmm.
head is his head is as the most fine gold. His locks are bushy and black as ravens. So
Mm-hmm.
what they just lose the sight that it said his hair was black as a raven, but they see that his head was like most fine gold, and they say his locks are bushy. So they use that argument to kind of strengthen Song 5 and 10. But if we go back to Lamentation 7, I'm gonna try to put it in the context as far as the what did I do here? Oh man, hold on. All right, there it goes. Yeah, I go back to limitation and just kind of clear that up. That I don't think that the first verse 7 is dealing with light skin tone either. And I kind of and I'm kind of on the fence as far as the black the visage is blacker than coal because when you think about the condition they were in during that time, the condition was considered black. But let me go here to 4 and 7. Her Nazarites were purer than snow; they were whiter than milk. Okay, so now if you want to put that in a context, I normally go to Psalms 51:7 to kind of put that in the context. Because when you read Psalms 51:7, you see, purge me with hyssops, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. So what that's talking about a level of purity, because
Mhm.
there is no way you could be any skin tone and you wash and you become whiter than snow. And we know that because, and I'm not going to get into this because I know we didn't talk about this, but I'm going to just use Naaman the leper just as a reference, because
Yeah.
we know once he washed, his skin became back to its normal tone. So he didn't become whiter than snow because he was already whiter than snow. But that's all I want to say about that for now. But when we go back to Lamentations 4:7, I don't think it's talking about white skin, anyways, because then you see more radiant body than rubies. And right there, to me, that isn't speaking about skin tone either. I'm thinking that it's speaking of basically being healthy, because when you look at it, they went from a healthy, ruddy color to a blacker than coal color. You see what
Hmm.
I'm saying? So I don't. So right now, I'm gonna say that neither one of those verses, I think, are talking about the color of the skin.
Yeah. Well, we had
I,
the Hebrew word for blacker, hashak, is it doesn't mean the color black
right.
in any way. So um, I think the only possible word there that is referring to the skin color is ruddy, which I think we will cover a bit later on. It is one of the fundamental ones that I think that we should deal with later. But you brought up Song of Solomon, and we've looked at verse 5 and 10. Do you subscribe that verse 1:5 is dealing with Solomon?
Mm, I would think so. Yeah.
So when Solomon says, so, bear with me 1 second. I should find it. So when Solomon says that he is, oh, where is that verse?
Okay. So while you
Sorry,
look, no, while you look for it, I'll go ahead and
yeah, my
I go.
computer's probably not as fast as yours.
I don't worry about it. I'm in Songs 1:1. And see, me, I always like to look at the thesis of a sentence. Of a chapter, and see what the thesis is saying. So
Yeah. Okay.
when you look at Songs of Songs 1, verse 1, you see the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. That right there, that's
Yeah.
very, very pivotal, because it's not saying that the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's mistress or his wife or his maiden, it's not saying that. It's saying the Song of Songs, which is Solomon. And it's kind of peculiar that the first verse of the first chapter of Song is basically giving you, well, me, my understanding of bibliography is giving you a rundown. So
Okay.
that thesis right there gives me a rundown that this song, well, all the songs are Solomon's that are in this present.
So you think that Song of Solomon 1 is Solomon speaking
Yes, I do.
all, all the way through, or
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think it's speaking all the way through. Yeah.
okay? So if we look at verse 2, where it
Okay.
says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. Who is Solomon speaking to there?
I think he's speaking of his Savior, because when and a lot of people say that it's perverted. Well, they look at it from a perverted, basically carnal way of thinking, because I know you have a dad. If you haven't seen him in a while, he might kiss you on the cheek. What is he kissing you with? He's kissing you with his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
He's not kissing you in the mouth. Right here, it's not saying that he's kissing him in his mouth. He said he kissed him with the kisses of his mouth. Just like when I think it was either Jacob or Esau. Well, Jacob, when he had to go down and kiss his father, he kissed him with his mouth. What did he kiss him with? When Joseph saw his brothers, they kissed him on the neck. What did they kiss him with? They kissed him with their mouths. So I don't see how, when you say he kissed me with the kisses of his mouth, how the average person could see that being tongue kisses in the mouth. Because Solomon is very genius, and he knows that. Well, he's wise. He was wise, so he knows that if he words it a certain way, those that are carnal are going to look at it like that. And I can see him now saying, "Yeah, these guys, they're really thinking that this is a woman." When I started out saying that this Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, they're going to think that it's a woman kissing me, and that's not what it's saying to me. Now, what
Okay,
do
so
you think that it's saying?
I believe that this is Solomon's bride, which I believe to be the Queen of Sheba, that is speaking to Solomon. Now, we have to continue on. We have to go to verse 3. Because of the Savior of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. So if we're talking about that, he's talking about his Savior. Are we now talking that that the virgins love the Savior? Is that we have a? What is it that's specific about the virgins that love him, that love the Savior?
Well,
We have to continue on to verse 4 as well. Draw me, we will run after thee. The King hath brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine. The upright love thee. Now, again, if we're talking about this is that he's talking to the Savior. Are you saying that the Savior brought him into his chambers?
yeah, because the bride, where's the bride supposed to go when the bride chambers? When I mean Israel is the bride. Do you agree with that, or do you think that
I disagree that the Israel is the bride of Christ.
okay, okay, all right. Well, how
The
about
bride of,
this?
for me, the bride of, I'll just put it out there. Maybe we won't get to this because we probably won't have time, and this isn't the debate for that anyway. But the bride of Christ, people think that it's the church, or Christians believe that it's the church. The bride of Christ is the New Jerusalem.
Okay, yeah, and I could kind of agree with that, because I was going back. Well, I do agree with that, because I was going back and forth with some guys, about the nation being taken from Israel and given to a new nation.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into that, it's still leading you back to the righteous Israel, though the remnants. But that's not something that we have to get into.
But we have a problem. We do have a problem with that understanding that this is Solomon speaking all the way through, because now we need to go back to 5 and 10. If this is
Yeah.
if this is Solomon speaking in 5 and 10, then he's calling the Savior ruddy as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. But well, let me go. Let's stay in chapter 1 first. And it says, because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. So it's saying thy good ointments. what does that mean to you? Thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee, because we know that going into the kingdom, there are going to be 144,000 virgins. So, and those were the ones that were faithful and righteous and didn't know a woman. So they loved the Savior that much to where they preserved their virginity. So when I see this right here,
I disagree with that as well, because
okay.
Revelation is very symbolic, and actually I do believe that the virgins that are described in Revelation, I can't remember the exact verse, but the virgins that are described in Revelation are actually those that it's not talking about physical virginity. It's talking about those that have not gone off to other churches, gone away from the true God. Those they remain pure in the sense that they've remained pure to God.
So you think that when it says they have not defiled themselves with women, you're
Yeah,
thinking that the women are the other churches.
women throughout Revelation is commonly referred to as a church, as the church, or different churches. Again, we can definitely go into that, but I don't know if we've really got time to deal with that.
Okay, well that's interesting because that's something we could talk about later, because when you read Revelation 9 and 8 and they had hair as the hair of a woman, I mean, they
Yeah.
really don't reference women much in Revelation. So, I mean, there's only like twice that I see that it's being referenced. And one time it's speaking of men not defiling themselves with women. Then another one is talking about the hair of a woman. So that's something we can get into later. That would be
Yeah,
interesting.
I have got that argument somewhere, but I don't have it available to me right now, and I don't have the verses that that I would need in order to support my argument on that. I don't think it's overly relevant to the argument, because I don't believe that the virgins here are related to those virgins in Revelation. But yeah, that's definitely for another time, I think. And that's
Okay.
definitely going off onto a completely different subject.
Right. I agree. So, yeah, so I kind of want to get into what I was saying, and let's see.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Hold on one second. Let me go back. All right, so back to verse 3 of Psalm 1. Because of the savor which is smell of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. So so me, I said the way I feel about that, that I think that it's talking about those that because I forget, there's a verse that basically speaks about, those, and even I think Paul talks about it. He talks about, not defiling yourself with a woman, but if you do, it's better to be married. I can't really remember which verse it is or the context of it, but
Yeah.
it sort of reminds me of this. But I'm gonna go ahead and go on to verse 4. Draw me. We will run after thee. The king hath brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in thee. Who is the we? We will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine, the upright love thee.
Mm-hmm.
So now it is going from me to talking about we will be glad and rejoice in thee. Okay, so to me, this is the righteous Israel basically staying true to the Savior. And at this time, it was the God of Israel who was the Savior. And in the next verse is saying, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Because and I really should have prepared for this a little more, but I've done some research on it before. But And it's sort of in the same context of what you were kind of alluding to in Revelation when you said that woman is speaking of the churches. Normally, when the daughters of Israel, or I believe, and the daughters of Jerusalem, that's talking about those that fell to the Gentile customs. So when I see, oh, you daughters of Jerusalem, I'm thinking of the ones that aren't doing the will of God. That's why he's saying, I am black but comely, oh, ye daughters of Jerusalem. So just because he's black and beautiful, but he's having a conversation at that point with the daughters of the Jerusalem that are not looking upon him because I am black. You know what I mean? Because that, to me, that lets me know that he might be darker than a lot of the Israelites because the sun have looked upon me, and I think that's just symbolic. You know what I mean? My other children were angry with me. I mean, he was what Solomon was the keeper of the vineyard. I mean, he was like at the bottom. You know, he came out of nowhere to assume the authority. But my vineyard have I not, my own vineyard have I not kept. So to me, all day that's speaking of Solomon. That's him talking.
Mm. I strongly disagree with that. In verse 5, we have Solomon referring to his own curtains as the curtains of Solomon. Solomon is referring to himself in a third person in that verse. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that speak in third persons. Even Christ speak in third person.
But he's not speaking in the third person. He's speaking in first person all the way through the verse. Then he suddenly switches at the end to third person.
Right, and that's what happened. I mean, Christ. I mean, I don't really remember the context, but I mean, if I look into it, I'm pretty sure Christ has done the same thing.
Okay.
So that's not new language to me. For just speaking in third person to me wouldn't be enough proof to turn around the first verse that says the songs are songs which are Solomon's. And let me see if I can find that one.
Okay.
That one verse that kind of.
Does Solomon refer to, if we go to verse 13, if we go to verse 13 and read that, I don't know if you've got it, if you can get verse 13 up.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So Solomon in verse 13 there says, a bundle of myrrh is my well-beloved unto me. He shall lie all night betwixt my breasts.
Okay.
This doesn't sound like a man speaking to me.
Right.
My well-beloved unto me. So this is Solomon talking to his savior. So he shall lie all night with him betwixt my breasts.
Okay. Hold on one second. I'm trying to see, and I'll get back to that. I'm looking for, I think it's 1 Kings 4 and 23. Let me go there right quick and I'll come back. That was in there. Let's see here. All right, I'll find it. But let me go back to it. So you basically said, so to you right here, it's so you're looking at it still in that mind state. He shall lie all night betwixt my breast.
Yeah.
So that's sexual. So that's sexual to you.
I would suggest that is sexual language. I wouldn't say that was the language that that I would use of my savior. Oh, if we go, I'm also willing to deal with verse 8, where I believe Solomon is speaking. If thou know not, O thou fairest among women, go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock, and feed thy kids beside the shepherd's tent. Is Christ, or is the Savior, fairest among women?
Uh, which verse was that again?
Verse 8.
All right, verse 8. Let's see here. If thou know not, O thou fairest among women, go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock, and feed thy kids. But I mean, to me, the fairest among women. All right, well, we can take a look at it because that is interesting. Oh, thou, hold on. If thou know not, O thou fairest of women, go thy way. So, who is that speaking to you?
This is, to me, this is the beginning of when Solomon starts to speak. To me, it's the Queen of Sheba. I'm not dogmatic about it being the Queen of Sheba. There are many people who do believe that this is Solomon speaking to his bride, Queen of Sheba, but it doesn't. To me, that's irrelevant. I just believe that he is talking to one of his many wives. And verse 1 to 7 is the bride speaking, and verse 8 is Solomon begins to speak. Solomon is talking to the bride and responding back to her.
Okay, let's see here. All right, well, let me try this first because we were talking about breasts before. So let's go to Numbers 11. Okay, and and let's start at verse 11. And Moses said unto the Lord, wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant, and wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them, that thou shouldest say unto me, carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the sucking child unto the land which thou swearest unto their fathers? Now, what is Moses talking about when he say, carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the sucking child? I mean, does he have breasts that are giving milk to a child? What is he talking about right there?
This is correct. This is symbolic of his rearing the nation, of his carrying the nation. Yeah. Can we look at the Hebrew word there?
For what, bosom?
Mm-hmm.
Bosom, hollow, bottom mist. The bosom, bottom lap, mist within. Bosom of a garment.
Mm-hmm.
The
And
breast with the breast, for example, the breast with the arms.
mm-hmm. So he's talking about the bosom, which is symbolic. Can we go back to Song of Solomon 113?
Yeah. Alrighty.
And I didn't actually see the the word that was used in Numbers. Sorry.
It was bosom.
Yeah, the Hebrew word. Sorry.
Oh, okay, let me go back. Okay, bosom. Hike. Hike.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So if we go back to Song of Solomon 113 and have a look at the word for breast there, you will see that the word is shad. It's a completely different word.
Okay. All right, breast, female breast. contracted. Okay.
When the word in Numbers was used, it was used symbolic of Moses carrying. Here, this is the physical breast. This is not. This isn't symbolic. This is the physical breast in this word in this verse, and it is, as you say, shad is the female breast. So I don't think that Solomon was saying that the Lord will be between his female breasts.
Well, I think it's being symbolic of. I think it's symbolic language. I don't think that he's saying that literally the Lord is going to be lying with him intimately. I don't look at it like that. So let's
Yeah,
go back.
I certainly agree that that Solomon is not saying that the Lord will lie with him physically, because he's not talking about the Lord. He's talking about his bride, who he will be lying physically with, and she is, as verse 8 says. Well, sorry.
So hold on. So it switched back to the woman now. So now the lady is speaking again.
In verse 8 is Solomon speaking.
Okay, so now what are the rules for switching between male and female?
The rules, I think that we've got to look at the language that is being used for a start, and I don't think I'm the only one that would read Song of Solomon as verse 1 to 7 being the bride, and verse 8 onwards, verse 8 to verse 10, I believe, it is Solomon speaking. Then the bride starts speaking again in verse 12.
Now, how are you determining this?
The language that is being used, and this is not just, like I say, not just myself that would use it in this way. This is part of, if you go to any kind of commentary on this chapter, or in fact, actually, if you go to any commentary on the Song of Solomon, full stop, it is universally agreed, I would say, apart from those who would argue against this being Solomon and his bride, which I would think would be solely down to the Hebrew Israelites. I'm not saying, I wouldn't say that totally that it would just be the Hebrew Israelites, but the vast majority of people would ascribe to the fact that this is clearly language all the way through the Song of Solomon, of a bride or a woman and a man. The language that is used in Song of Solomon is not the kind of language that would be between, certainly not just one person for a start. You said that this is Solomon speaking all the way through. There's clearly more than one person speaking here.
Not really. Oh, well, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. It's fine. But it's clearly that the fact that there is female and male usage of language here. It isn't. We're not talking about one person speaking. There is female, clearly language that only a female would use, and there is language that that is clear that it is a man speaking, and this is just universally agreed that the Song of Solomon is a confession of love between two people.
Okay.
Now the second person, if we say that Solomon is confessing his love to Christ or to his Savior, that's one thing. But there is response. This is not language of one person speaking. There is response back, and the response back is feminine. And I do not believe that that Christ is the fairest among women.
No,
I
that's
do not believe that Solomon would say that that my well-beloved, which could be which might be worth actually looking at the Hebrew of well-beloved, which I haven't actually done before, but what that actually means. But the fact is that there are female breasts, and Solomon would not be using the language of female breasts if he was talking to Christ.
okay. Well, this is why I say we kind of see things a little differently, because when I read verse 13, let me start with verse 8. If thou know not, O thou fairest among women, go thy way. So first of all, you said that these are two different people talking, starting in verse 8. Now Solomon is speaking.
I believe that Solomon is speaking in verse 8, yeah.
Well, because earlier I made it clear that I thought the daughters of Jerusalem were the Israelites that had gone astray. So when he said, if thou know not, O thou fairest among women, now he's talking about those that are doing righteousness. Go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock and feed thy kids beside the shepherd's tent. So he's saying, stay on the path, those that are righteous, Israel, because you have the daughters of Jerusalem, which are the ones that are not on the path. And then you have the ones that are staying on the path. He's telling them, go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock and feed thy kids beside the shepherd's tent. Now, when I go down to verse 13, a bundle of myrrh is my well beloved unto me. It's talking about that sweet ointment, that savor ointment again. He shall lay all night between my breasts. To me, what is between my breast is my heart. So that means when I rest at night, what do you read in the Lord's Prayer? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. To me,
but you just said
no, LJ, I didn't cut you off. So you got to kind of let me go. A bundle of myrrh is my well beloved unto me, and he shall lay all night between my breasts. But when I brought out Numbers 1 and 12, speaking about bosom, I brought that out to show it as a symbolism. And these breasts here, now more as I read it, it's symbolic. And the Lord is going to be in his breast all night. And to me, it's talking about his heart, and it's not talking about actual female breasts. And I know what the interpreters say. I know that because men don't have breasts. But Solomon is clearly talking about his heart, because I found what I was looking for. Let me go to Kings 4, 1 Kings 4 again. Then when you go down to verse 32, it said, and he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. So this is Solomon. That lets you know that he had way more proverbs than are in the Bible, because he had 3,000 proverbs, and he had way more songs that are recorded in the Bible, because his songs were 1,005. So I still go back to verse. I mean, this is a wise man speaking. And for me to even say that I'm as wise as him, I'm still trying to get the understanding of what he said. But the more as I read it and the more as I talk to you, I'm realizing that the breast that he's talking about, but he said between his breasts. I mean, I don't know how anybody could lay between a woman's breast. I mean, my woman, I can't lay in between her breasts. I can lay on her breast. But when you think about what's in between the breasts, it's your heart. And that's what I'm seeing there.
Okay, you're gonna read. You're gonna read the heart into that. There's not really much. You asked me a question regarding how do I distinguish between who's speaking. Now, you've said that the virgins and the women here is Israel, or is was that correct? Sorry, they were women of Jerusalem.
The daughters of Jerusalem, I feel like,
The daughters of Jerusalem, yeah. So, how do you distinguish? How do you distinguish? Because you asked this question of me. How do you distinguish between when Solomon is speaking to the daughters of Israel of Jerusalem and Christ?
okay, because I don't see him referring to Christ as a woman anywhere in there. I see when he refers to woman, it's the same way as Christ referred to the church as his bride. I mean, what I took French, and French was when you had a majority of the population. Let's say you had 100 people, you could have one man and 99 women. You're still going to use the masculine form of the word. But if you have 100 women with no men, then I believe that you use the feminine word. But right here, we see when Christ talks about his bride being the church, we see Christ basically saying that Israel or the church is his bride. Now, how can the church be bride when the church consists of men as well? Because the way I see it is Christ is the head. And as the head does is he protects his own. So that makes the church Christ's or his possession. So to me, that's making it in a feminine form. So that's the same way I see right here when Solomon is speaking. He's speaking from somebody that's way wiser than me. And I'm gonna just speak for myself. So when I see him say, "Oh, fairest among women, go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock," all throughout the Bible, Israel is considered sheep. So the sheep that didn't stray are the fairest among women. Go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flocks and feed thy kids. Because Paul he even talks about a woman is supposed to feed her things, good things, so that her kids could grow up to be, obedient, and women could grow up to be good wives. But when I look at verse 5, I am black but comely, O daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar and the curtains of Solomon. Look not upon me because I am black, because the sun have looked upon me. My mother children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard. So that lets me know that there's some type of strife in there. So when I see old daughters of Jerusalem, and just on the context of daughters of Israel and daughters of Jerusalem throughout the Bible, from what I can recollect, and we can look into it, shows that Israel is not doing their best. And that's the way, and that's the way I've been looking at it since I've been looking at the daughters of Jerusalem for almost a year now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we, so there's still some more. We spent quite a long time on this
Right.
one verse, but I would like to go to Song of Solomon chapter 4
Okay.
and verse 5, and I would like you to just explain. Do you put the same meaning to this to the to this verse?
Okay, which verse? Verse 5?
Yeah.
Okay, let me start at Song 4 and 4. Thy neck is like the Tower of David, builded for an armory, whereon there hang 1,000 bucklers, all shields of mighty men. Thy two breasts are like two young roes that are twins, which feed among the lilies.
Mm-hmm. So is this symbolic? What what
Mm,
what what do we call about the two breasts here?
okay, well, it seems like even if you start at verse 1, everything about up to this point is symbolic. because he's talking about the teeth that are the flock of the sheep in verse 2. Thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove eyes within thy locks. Thy hair is as the flocks of goats that are pure from Mount Gilead. So, I mean, this whole chapter up to verse 5 to me is speaking of, it's speaking in a symbolic language. So let me read it again. Thy two breasts are like two young roes that are twins. So,
what would be what would be the reference to the breasts here? What
is it the same?
the reference to the breast is not a physical reference to breasts, and then he's describing how they look, or the breasts are symbolic as well.
I would think the breasts are symbolic because, the breasts are like two young roes that are twins. What is a roe? A roe is like some type of rodent, is it? What is a roe?
I have no idea.
Well, first we got to find out what a roe is. A gazelle. So you mean to tell me somebody would have two breasts like a gazelle? So to me, a gazelle is pretty fast. So it says thy two breasts are like two young roes or two young gazelles that are twins, which feed among the lilies.
Okay,
So
and that's literally just going to put any kind of interpretation onto that. It clearly doesn't say that that's what it is. That's an interpretation of what the reference is meaning.
So what do you think it means?
To be honest, I'm not positive on that, and I would have to, I think, look into it a little bit more. But I'm just looking at the language of what is being used, the feminine and masculine language that is being used. It's more that what I'm trying to show is. It's clear that the Song of Solomon obviously is very symbolic, but what I do believe is that there is feminine and masculine forms of language being used, and the language for the feminine, or the masculine is coming back at Solomon. It's not being used of Christ. There's also in verse 9 and 10 we have the word my sister, my spouse. Who would this be in reference to?
Okay, which verse is that? Okay, verse 10.
It's in verse 9, 10, and 12.
Okay, let's see. All right, let's start at verse 8. Come with me from Lebanon, my spouse, with me from Lebanon. Look from the top of Amana, from the top of Shinir, and Hermon, from the lion's den, from the mountains of the leopards. Thou hast ravished my heart. It's talking about the heart. My sister, my spouse, thou hast ravished my heart with one of thy eyes, with one chain of thy neck. How fair is thy love, my sister, my spouse? How much better is thy love than wine, and the smell of thine ointments than all spices? Thy lips, O my spouse, drop as the honeycomb. Honey and milk are under thy tongue, and the smell of thy garment is like the smell of Lebanon. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. Okay. Now, to me, we were talking about breasts, and now all of a sudden we see the heart being mentioned twice. So, is that carrying on from the two breasts? I don't know because
they're separated. The heart is being referenced separately from the breasts. I think they're two different words. They're two different references quite clearly.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting, and you know what? This is something that we might have to get back to later because we wanted to talk about the color verses
Yeah.
And now we
So
and now we're
you
talking
spent a
about
long time on one.
yeah, now we're talking about breast.
Yeah,
Which
we've
is
got off.
right. So, I mean, we spent a lot of time on it. And, if you want to dialogue at some point in the future, and let's dedicate that to the
Yeah,
Songs of Solomon, I would definitely love to do that because, as you see, we could talk about this for quite some time.
yeah. I think that maybe what might be a good place to go. Maybe to Christ himself, to Revelation. I don't know. This one seems to me, for you. I don't know how relevant this verse is, but from what I've watched of a lot of the camps, um, they seem to use this a lot. This verse, uh, Revelation 1:14, 1:15. There's also the David as well. His vision of
7 and 9.
the Son of Man coming. I think that maybe we should deal with that.
Okay. All right. So, you want to let's go to Daniel 7 and 9 too. But okay? You want to read this one first?
Let's as in we'll start off with verse 14 and 15. I think that's the two verses that are mainly used. So we have Revelation 1:14. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters.
Okay.
So obviously the main thing here is that we've got the whiteness of his hair, uh, the word wool, which is often used to say that Christ had woolly hair, and not the long hair that we see in all of the pictures that I'm not going to try and make claim that the Christ that is depicted in these pictures is anything like what the Christ would have been that walked the face of this earth. So let's get that straight. I do not believe that Christ was a long-haired, blue-eyed white man.
Okay.
But we do have, and obviously in verse 15 we've got the brass as if they burned in a furnace, and that one is normally used to say that this is a reference to the fact that when you burn brass, it goes black, and so Christ is therefore black. Is that am I misrepresenting the claim there, or would that be the claim?
No, I mean that is the claim, and I'm still standing on that claim. Now I like that claim, and that's the claim that I'm going with. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I'm going with that claim is because it says his head and his hairs were white like wool. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
the apologists, those of the apologetic community, and I just call them apologetics because I like to be funny, and I know it upsets them a little bit. But they like to say that this talks about texture. I mean, it talks about color and not texture. But
Mm-hmm.
but if I see an old man, a great man, of I guess Black American descent, and I see him with white hair, the first thing I'm going to say is he has woolly hair. He has hair like wool. That's what I'm going to say because when I look at his hair, it looks like wool. you know,
Mhm.
in the color and in the texture. So when I see that, that's the way I look at it. And but the thing about his eyes were as a flame of fire. Now, if you want now see where you might have an argument that is if you say, hey, you know, we're talking about literal wool here, but now we're talking about, you know, a symbolic eyes, you know, how his eyes are as a flame of fire. And I'm under the understanding that, you know, that flame of fire is the red that is spoken about in Genesis 49. And I don't know if it's 49 or 10, but because he drank wine, or
Mhm.
if it's because when he comes back, he's going to come back with judgment. And we know those that are going to be tried are going to be tried with fire. So, I mean, there's two different ways you could look at that. But when it says his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, then they try to say the burned means burn in. And we say that burned means burnt. So now you have a conundrum here because you have as if they burned in a furnace. So it's kind of hard to see burned in a present sense used. You know what I mean? Now, if you see something continues to burn, you say that it's burning, or that
Okay.
it's, or I watch it burn. But you don't say I watched it as if it burned. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because burn is a past tense use.
Okay.
So if something is burned in a furnace, it's possibly black or dark. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So how are you seeing it?
Okay. Well, the first thing that we need to understand is that, and it doesn't seem to be brought out too much or stated, that Revelation. We have to understand when Revelation is. When is Revelation? What is it referring to?
It's referring to the revelation, the revealing of end
Okay,
times.
the end times. Yeah. So this is a reference to Christ, not the man that walked the earth, but this is the glorified Christ for a start. This is in no way referencing the Jesus or the Messiah that walked earth. This is the glorified Christ in his glorified body for a start. So before we even analyze the language that is used, um, we have to remember this is not Christ that walked on the earth. There's no reference here at all to a physical man. This is
Okay.
glorified. Okay, but let's start with the fact that in the verse 114, the language that is clearly used here is that wool is a reference to color. His head and his hairs were white. These two are not separate. So if you say that his hair is white, which is often the picture that I see that the camps often use of a black man with white hair. There's no distinguishing here between his head and his hairs. This does not say the hairs on his head. This is his head and his hairs were white. So this is a white-headed being, man, whatever. If we want to call this a man, this is a white-headed man with white hair. There's no break here between white like wool. It's white like wool. There's no comparison to texture. It is white like wool. The color white. Wool is white. This is a reference to the white wool. To further emphasize that, we have as white as snow after that comes straight after. There's an emphasis here on the white head, white hairs, and it is white. There's no way around that. This is white. If you go to Isaiah chapter 8, Isaiah 18:1, you will see that wool is used again. There is no reference here of texture. Isaiah 18:1, come now, and let us reason together, saith the Lord.
Hold on,
Thou,
Isaiah 18:1.
18:1, yeah, sorry.
Well,
I'll slow down.
now I'm looking at Isaiah 18:1. It's saying, "Woe to the land shadowing with wings."
Let me make sure that I have that correct. Sorry, other way round. Isaiah 1:18.
Okay.
My bad.
No problem. All righty.
Okay. Now we have. Is that correct? Let me check on there. Come now.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So it says, "Come now, let us reason together," saith the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. Here, clearly, the wool is referencing back to they will be as white as snow. There's no texture here. This is the sins. They are red. They're like crimson. They will be as white as snow, like wool. The same usage here, white as snow, and they will be like wool. There's no way around the fact that these two are linked together. The whiteness and the wool is a reference to color.
Okay. So what color is this? What color are they saying that the wool is right here?
This is the color that the wool is the exact same color as the white as snow. Your sins be scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. They be red as crimson. This is the exact same color.
Okay.
They shall be as wool. This is white as wool. And so when we go back to Revelation 1:14, this is a clear distinction between his head, which we also have to remember that this is referencing his head, not just his hair, and it's not the hair on his head. This is his head, and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow.
Okay, so what basically when I talk about my head, if I got hair, I'm talking about, like, if I say look at that head, that means your hair might be a mess, but I'm talking about your hair. But a lot of people say, look at his head, and or whatever, you know what I mean? Because when I look at his head and his hairs were white like wool, I'm looking at the head is full of white hair, and the hairs are what are on his face. That's the way I'm looking at it. So his head and his hairs, because the hairs on your face, are hairs. So when I see his head and his hairs were white like wool, I'm thinking about the hair on his head, and then the hairs on his face.
Okay. So even if we go with that, and we say that I think that's quite, yeah. Let's go with that. Even if you said that this is referring to the hair, and we'll forget the head part of that, the reference is clearly that the wool is a reference to color. There's no texture in this. There's no texture in Isaiah 1:18. This is color.
Right.
This is color.
Right. But Isaiah 18 is strictly symbolic. It's talking about strictly sins. So this right here, when you look at Revelation 1:14, you're talking about an appearance. You talk about there's two. I don't see how you can compare apples to oranges, because sins and a person's physical appearance are two different things.
Okay, so this isn't symbolic language. in Revelation?
Well,
This is physical. This is literal physical reference to the way that the person looks.
well, when you go to verse 1, what does it say? It
Verse
says,
in Revelation 1 is clear. To start with, Revelation, the person that John sees when he sees the person in Revelation 1:14 is not Christ anyway. It's actually an angel who has come in as Christ. That's made clear, very clear in Revelation 1:1.
all right, so it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, and if we go to verse 13 as well, it clearly states that, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man. When John turned to see who spoke, from Revelation 12, sorry, we probably need to go back that far. And I turned to see the voice that spake with me. And being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. This
So
isn't
now
Christ.
right, that's not Christ, but it says one like unto the Son of Man. So this is clearly describing a person, the way they
Yeah,
look, because they have a garment on.
yeah. The who John saw was an angel that represented the glorified Christ.
Right, I agree.
Okay, so the verse 14 is not actually Christ, but it is the description of Christ. So it's kind of irrelevant because it is still referencing Christ. But I just wanted to say that John didn't actually see the glorified Christ. He saw the angel who represented and was the image of Christ.
Right, now I do agree with that. Right.
Okay. So now we need to we'll move, for time's sake, we'll move on from the color of the hair, because I think that actually what is more important is actually what I think that maybe I need to talk about the color white, because we need to look at the Greek word there, lukios. This means white is a brilliant whiteness, a light, it's brightness. It's not white as in the color white. It's in the terms of brightness, in a shine type way. It's not referring to a white as in literal color white. This is brightness. If you want to go and check the Greek there for lukios.
Yeah, I see 2 biblical meanings. I see one, as you said, light, bright, brilliant, and then I see another one that says dead white, of the whitening color of ripening grain. So you have 2 different colors for the word white.
Mm-hmm. What I do believe that this is referring to the brightness, or which I will come back to, because I believe this is actually talking about the countenance of Jesus, which when Paul saw Jesus on the road to Damascus, what did he see? I'll have to find the verse for that.
And while you find that, this is what I see in Matthew 5:36. It's actually the first reference to white. And when you read Matthew, well, you continue to look for it. I'm gonna just go ahead and read.
Yeah,
So you see right here.
I've got the verses, but yeah, you carry on.
Okay, neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. And it's the same color white that is being described in Revelation 1 and 14. So, but when you look at chapter 17 and verse 2, then you see, as was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. So now that's talking about him in his transfigured form, in his glorified form. So
this is the glorified Jesus, which is what Revelation is. Now, when Paul saw Jesus on the road to Damascus, which is Acts 9 and 1, it's actually that's where it starts. It's actually in verse 3 that I think, yeah, verse 3 is where Paul sees a bright light from heaven. So when Jesus, when Paul saw Jesus, the glorified Jesus that was in heaven, he saw a bright light. This is talking about the glorified Christ, and it's the countenance rather than the physical color of white. I did say that my little puppy might join us.
I was just thinking about that. So yeah, welcome to the chat.
Yeah, he decided that he would come and say hello.
Okay, good. All right, so okay, so you were at verse 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now Paul was blinded by the light, or Saul at the time was blinded by the light that he saw, the brightness of Christ that he saw, the glorified Christ, and he was blinded by that for 3 days. So this to me is talking about a glorified Christ and the brightness rather than the physical color of white. But I'd like to move on and move on to the brass, the feet.
Okay.
If we're going to say that the feet, we also have to go to. I'm not sure exactly where it is. It might be Revelation 2:18.
Okay. 2:18.
Because in Revelation 1 and 14 we only get the legs, but I'm not sure if it's in Daniel, in the description in Daniel, where Daniel sees the glorified Christ, the vision, or whether it's in Revelation 2:18. It's one of them, but we also get the arms as well.
Yeah, 2:18 is talking about his feet as fine, like fine brass. Yeah.
Yeah. Are the arms mentioned in 2:18?
No, I know what you're talking about. Let me see.
No, I think it's I think it's Daniel.
I think so too.
Yeah, so it's in Daniel 10:6. So, if you want to bring that up, do you want me to read that, or?
So which one are you going with, 2 and 18, or Daniel 10
I'm going to go
6?
with. I just want to go to Daniel 2 and 6. Sorry, 10 and 6, because I want to just show that the color that is in Revelation 1 and 14 is only referencing his feet, but in Daniel 10 and 6, we also get that his arms are the same color, and we get a slightly different color in Daniel 10 and 6. We get the brass, but we don't get burnt brass.
Right.
I want to address the burnt side of it anyway, but I just want to bring to the attention that his arms and feet here in Daniel 10 and 6 are polished brass. They're not there. There's no burnt brass in this reference at all.
Okay.
So his Daniel 10:6, his body was also was like beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning. So we get, you see, so his face is the appearance of lightning. This is again referencing, I believe, not the color, but the brightness of it. Um, this was the shine, the brightness of the color of his face. Then we get his eyes and as lamps of fire, which we've already seen, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass. Now, polished brass is not black. Polished brass is yellow. And if we have his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass. Now, the word polished in that in Daniel 10:6 is kalal, is the Hebrew word kalal, and it means burnished brass, which means polished. It's a golden yellow color, and it's certainly not a dark brown one.
Right. Okay.
This is also, I believe, used in Ezekiel 1:7. The
Okay.
same, where the color of burnished brass. Burnished brass is not burnt brass. Burnished brass is polished brass. Polished brass is like a goldeny yellow color. When you polish brass, it doesn't go black.
Right, but I was under the impression that burnished brass was like, you know, antique looking brass. You know what I mean? That has the darker
Burnished,
hue to it.
yeah, burnished brass, and I mean, if you want to look at the word kalal, polished, it's polished, it's
Right.
cleaned brass. There's burnished is not a dark colored brass at all. It's a yellowy color, yellowy golden colored brass.
Okay, so
Okay.
let's look up the word polished brass and let's see. Let's take a look. Brighten, burnish, polish. So brighten as if it's sharpened. So burnish, I mean, I guess we could look up burnished brass and see what it looks like. Let's
Yep,
see.
that's fine.
Yeah, see, when you look at it, I mean, it's a darker hue. Like when I think of burnished brass, I think of like this faucet here, you know, this little doohickey there. So I mean, I see that there's different tones of polished brass or burnished brass, but to me, it's still like a darker hue. I don't see any olive tone in these references here. You know, like they say, you know, the Mizrahi Jews or whatever. I don't see them as this tone right here. And I mean, I don't know, you know. So when I think of burnished brass, I think of this right here. But but when you think of burnished brass, you think of the lighter tone brass, right? You think of something like this. Hold on. I think what I clicked. You think of something like this.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a brighter yellow, more yellowy. It's what kalal means. The color. No, yeah, kalal. I need to go and look at kalal bit. I'm quite positive that that is polished. I mean, if can you look at what it does in that one verse? It does say burnished. Although in Daniel 10:6, in Daniel 10:6, it says polished brass. Can you look up polished brass?
Yeah, but polish and burnish means the same thing.
But they might slightly give you a different color tone when you use the word polished, which
Right,
is
polish.
used.
I think polish just means it has a polished finish. Like when you polish a floor or wax a floor, it's more of a smooth finish. But
Mhm.
burnish just means that it's a little rougher in texture. That's what I was trying
Yeah.
to tell you.
Which, but the word I brought up burnished brass, which was used in Ezekiel 1:7, which is kalal. But in Daniel 10:6, the word is actually polished brass, not burnished brass.
Right, but like I just said, polished. When you polish something, you basically smooth it out. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like if you polish anything, it's gonna be smooth. Just like when you polish. What happens when you polish a floor? It's glossy, it shines. Or when
yeah,
you wax a floor, it's glossy and it shines. But burnish is basically the color. I mean, brass is brown, a derivative of brown, anyways. Polish just means that you just smooth it out. I mean, I don't know how else to put polish.
we've clearly got two. When you type in burnished and you type in polished, you get two clearly different results. When you type in burnished brass, you've clearly got this a darker tone than when you type in polished brass. Polished brass is the word that is used in Daniel 10:6, whereas burnished brass was Ezekiel 1:7. But it is polished brass that we get
But
in
the
Daniel 10
difference
and 6.
the difference that you really see is a
The
more
yellowness.
shine. No, not the yellowness, because even if you look at some of the dark polished brass, it's still shiny. Polishing polishing means, like somebody said it in the chat. I don't know if that's your in search of Yah. Who is that? Is that somebody? Is that one of your family members?
No, nothing.
Okay. Well, they kind of agree that polishing is the smooth, and so when I see
So
polishing,
we
I'm
have a
thinking
shine, yeah? We have a
right
shine.
something right something that's more smooth, and
Hmm.
burnish is just basically straight out the fire. You know what I mean? Still in that burnished look. So I don't. I really don't see the difference. I know that when we look, at different like doorknobs and handles and all that stuff, you see a different color and you see like a yellow or more of a yellow looking brass,
Hmm.
but everything that I see is shiny. But when I go back to burnish, is everything shiny? I don't remember. Everything isn't as shiny. So you have two totally different concepts. When you try to put the two together, I don't think it works.
I, okay. I think that quite clearly that the word polished indicates the shine, and certainly not the fact that it was a dark brass color. I think it was far more clear that it was a yellowy gold color. But when we go to Revelation 1:15, if we go back there,
Okay. What did you hold on?
uh, if I can,
All right, Revelation 1 and 15.
yeah, if my computer would play ball here. Okay, so in Revelation 1 and 15, we have the word is fine brass, and the Greek there, chalkolilibon, means a golden or yellow color.
Okay, let's take a look. So you said the fine brass means a yellow color.
Mm-hmm.
Some metal like gold, if not more precious.
Mm-hmm.
But so
So
when
it's
you
actually,
look at it, it's like burnt. It's describing it as burnished copper, alloy copper, silver having brilliant luster, or fine brass. So I mean, I'm still thinking it's talking about the polishing though, because anything that's fine. I mean, like when you look at the etymology of the word, they're saying that it's the whiteness or brilliancy.
mm-hmm.
But when I think about brilliancy, I think about like shiny. I don't think of the actual color of fine.
So shiny
So
brass. Is that what
yeah,
you're?
shine. Yeah, I mean smooth brass. Yeah, smooth and shine. Something smooth. Burnish would be something a little bit rougher in texture, but smooth is something like if we use lotion, it smooths your skin out a little more. So that would look like more of a polished brass in so many words.
So a shiny, brilliant brass, yeah, is what? Is that what you?
Well, I would say more polished. Like it says, fine with something that is basically smooth. Very smooth, not something burnished. Burnished like I just went over is like a more rougher texture. So I don't see it as a shiny, glaring sphinx or anything like that. I just see it as, and I just don't see that. I mean, I understand where you're coming from because I'm very familiar with that argument, because some of my videos are going against those guys that, speak that type of language. But I just don't see it as a yellow looking brass. You know what I mean? Or yellow looking.
Okay. So the next word that we need to look at is
Oh yeah, Bo Battles. He's speaking to you in the YouTube chat room.
I honestly cannot see that on my computer. So
Oh, okay,
um,
but you do have a fan that goes by the name of Leader for Christ. Yeah,
okay,
she's one of your fans, and then I think here's your sister. What's her name? Win Calumet Vegan.
could be.
Yeah, she said he's my brother.
Right, yeah, that'll be here then. The vegan
Right,
part gave it away.
right.
Okay, so we have, I want to go to, they burned in a furnace, yeah? So we need to work out this, whether burned is past tense.
Right.
Okay, so the word for burned here is purayo, and this is
I
in,
don't.
yeah, it's in the perfect participle form of the word that is used in this verse. It's it's in present tense. It's just in present tense. Purao, it means to glow. That's what it literally means, to glow, to be made to glow. And when you burn brass in a fire, it glows. It glows bright. This is not past tense. It doesn't say as if they were burnt in a furnace or they had been burned in a furnace. This is present tense language.
Okay.
The present tense says that they are burning, as if they burn in the fire. Not that they were burnt. It's present tense. They burn in a fire. When you put brass into the fire, it glows. It glows a brilliant white yellow color. So
LJ, I think you're breaking
much
up,
that
buddy.
the metal would. Sorry. Okay, so the person that is purifying the brass would need to wear goggles because the brightness is so bright, it's so white. The whole description of Jesus here is the brightness. The brightness of his whiteness of his hair. You said that the color was for his arms. It said on the I believe that's Blue Letter Bible that you're using.
Yep.
Yep. That was the brightness, the whiteness. The whole description here is just how bright Jesus, the glorified Jesus. We must remember this is the glorified Jesus. How bright the glorified Jesus shone, and the whole body was shining. And like I say, this is present tense language. This is a perfect participle form of the word. It literally just means to glow.
Right. And see, now what I'm doing is I'm looking at the results of that word, which is the strong word G4448. And when I look at the different uses of the words, I don't see anything that's reminding me of anything glowing. Like when I read Revelation 3:18, tried, that's the same word Peru or Padu. And it says, I counsel thee to buy of me tried gold in the fire. So when it says tried gold in the fire, that just means pure gold in the fire. It's not saying that it's, I mean, he's not saying buy me gold that's burning, that is on fire. He's saying buy me gold that's been tried in the fire. So he doesn't want any contaminants. He wants pure gold.
Yeah, this is
The,
this is the purification. This is the purification. This is language. This is using to show that the glorified Jesus Christ shines through the brightness of Jesus through his glorification. He's purified. The purification that he's gone through in with the glorified body. That's what this is. This is the whole reference to Jesus here is the glorified body, the glorified Jesus Christ. And
go ahead.
oh, what was that?
Go ahead.
When you can look at the word that this is fine, but you also have to look at the form of the word that is being used, and the form of the verb that is being used in Revelation 1:15 is a present tense verb. It's not in a past tense at all. This is present tense language, as if it burned in a, not as if it had, but as if it burned in a furnace. This is the brightness, the shining of Jesus. That's what the reference is. The Greek is very clear that this is a present tense. It's not in the past tense. So it's not that it had been burnt so that it became dark. It's burning. And when you burn brass, it doesn't become black until you finish. While you're burning it, the shine, the brightness of what is coming off of the brass, while you're purifying it,
Okay, well, here's one that'll help you out. When you look at 2 Peter 3:12, but looking and hasting unto the coming of the day of the Lord, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. So right there is talking about, an act of fire, but you see the word, you see the action word in front of it. They're saying being on fire. So so it's kind of different than the context that you're trying to use, because right here when you read Revelation in 1 and 15, it's like as if they burned in the furnace. But when you look at 2 Peter 3 and 12, heavens being on fire. So now the fire there is talking about a present or a continuing,
If
because
if you if you want to make that past tense, you cannot leave out the word had. In the English language, you cannot leave out the word had burned in order to make that past tense.
what do you
As
mean you
if they
can't leave out
burned,
half?
as if they burned is present tense language. You would have to include the word had burned, as if they had burned or
Mm,
had been burned. It's not past tense. There's no way that in the English language you can make that. You can't make that past tense in the English or the Greek.
so how can you have? So answer me this: how can you have fine brass? Fine brass is that it's already been refined and now it's been polished. So it's no more glowing. There's no more fire to it. That now they're spit shining and then polishing it up. You can't have fine brass that is still on fire.
Okay, there's
How can you have polished brass that is still on fire? It's just not possible.
right. Let's go back to the language of the Greek language. Like I said, this clearly is symbolic language of a glorified Christ. That is the whole point of this language, the language that is being used in both the English and the Greek, is of a shine, of something that is pure, that is being and has been purified. That's the whole point of the language. This isn't something that had burnt and become black. What
Okay,
kind of
because when John Revelator knew that this person was unto the liking of the Son of Man, did he know that just because he saw a shine and glow, or was it something about this being that presented himself to him that he recognized him, whether he was in his glorified body or not? It was something about that person that came to him where he recognized that it was in the likeness of Christ.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So
And
and
what
so
do you think that this is because the glorified Christ was the same color as the man that walked the earth, a black man?
well, what I'm saying is, I mean, it sounds like by making it burned, as in burn in. I don't see how he could, if it's that bright. I don't even know how he could recognize if it was fine brass or not, because fine brass is a finished product. That's something that you see on the shelves. When you say you want polished brass on the shelves, you don't look for something that's burning and that's on fire, and you want to take that home and say, I want to install that as a doorknob. That's not how you see it. Fine brass is something that's already been through the process. It's already been tried. It's already in a completed state. That's why it says as if it burned, because I'm looking at it like burnish, like something that already happened. I mean, I just need some help getting to where you are, to see. That's all.
Okay. And again, we are we're not talking in a past tense language in either the English or the Greek. So the fact that something had burnt in the fire is not is it's clear that this is a present tense language that is not referring to something that is turned black or turned dark. There's nothing in the language that would refer to that. You just cannot make this a past tense. That's the problem that I've got here. Whether it's something that is happening, it cannot be a past tense because there's nothing here that says past tense in English or the Greek. The Greek just doesn't allow this to be a past tense.
Okay, well, all right, well, you saying that it's present, but fine brass, LJ, is a completed product. It's complete. It's been completed. I mean, you're gonna have a hard time convincing anyone that something that is burned and is finished is still burning.
Okay. Like I said, the whole point of the language of verse 14 and 15 is to describe the brightness of Jesus. I mean, we're talking symbolic language that is being used to describe what Jesus Christ was. We're not talking about a physical image here. We cannot be talking about a physical image because Jesus doesn't. Are we saying that the Jesus Christ that walked this earth had a sharp two-edged sword coming out of his mouth? In verse 16, we have a sharp two-edged sword. So clearly we're talking symbolic language. The symbolic language is all about the glorified Jesus. We can't get past the fact this is the glorified Jesus.
Well,
we have we go back to if we go forward to verse 16 and we talk about here, his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. Again, another clear reference to the fact that Jesus Christ shone.
Okay,
the whole language here is to do with Jesus and the glorified Jesus and the brightness of his countenance. There's nothing to do with a physical man that walked the face of the earth.
Okay. So I mean his countenance. So when you see his countenance as the sun shining in his strength, I mean, that's a good point, LJ. That is a good point, but the two-edged sword thing, I definitely get that because he was cutting Pharisees and Sadducees up.
Okay, so we're talking symbolic there. We're not talking physical swords. We're talking symbolic.
I give you that for verse 16, but how can you say verse 13 is symbolic when it's clear saying that the person like the Son of Man was clothed with a garment down to the foot? It even went as far as to talk about the paps with the golden girdle. So I mean, that's very clear that the person that's being spoken of had it might have not been a physical image, but there was an image, and in that image, if you could see a girdle and a paps, then it couldn't have been shining that bright, because if something is just shining so bright, it's going to be hard as, I mean, you said it, Paul was blinded for 3 days. I mean, if he was blinded for 3 days, the light was that intense. Would he have been able to see red eyes? Would he have been able to see a gold girdle? Would he have been able to see, a garment, a robe down to his feet? No. You are not going to be able to see the details of something that bright.
But there's a difference between John, what he saw, and what Paul saw. Paul saw in the physical. John is seeing a vision. This is completely. They're not the same. You can't compare what Paul saw and what John saw.
Well,
Paul was on the physical earth with a glorified Christ that came to him. This is not what John saw. John saw a vision that was shown to him by the angel.
yeah, he saw a vision, and in that vision, he recognized who the person was, LJ. He recognized this person. If he just saw a shining bright light, he wouldn't have been able to recognize the person.
So you think that Jesus in his glorified body looks the same resemblance in his physical features?
Well, we're saying, I'm trying to figure out how to put it, but I wish I knew the chapter and verse where Jesus came back and Mary, they saw him, and he wasn't. I mean, he was in his. I would think he was in his glorified body then, because three
When he
days later,
rose,
yeah,
when he
when he
rose,
rose, yeah. But
there's no possible way that he could be in his glorified body in any state when he rose. Jesus said to the Pharisees that if you destroy this temple and I'll build it up again in 3 days, which he was referring to himself. If Jesus rose, this is a Jehovah's Witness argument against. They believe that Jesus Christ rose in a different body. If Jesus did not rise in his physical earthly body, then he did not raise that temple. That's a fact. Jesus, if he rose in a different body, he did not raise that temple. When Jesus said, "Put your hands in these holes," okay, unless Jesus was playing tricks and was using a different body and that had holes in this, he was saying, "Touch these holes. This is my physical body." And Jesus said that an angel, a spirit, has not flesh and bone. I have flesh and bone. This is my body. I raised up this temple. Jesus Christ rose in his body. There's no that's a Jehovah's Witness argument.
not really, not really, because I'm just saying, because once he rose, he was rising to it. I mean, I think that he rose to his glory. So that's when you rise, to me, that's in your glorified, you being glorified, because that's just the way I'm looking at it. I'm just telling you how I'm looking at it. And when I
touch me
see,
not, touch me not. I have not ascended to my Father yet. That's what Jesus said. Touch me
okay,
not.
well,
I have not yet ascended to my Father. He didn't ascend to the Father until 43 days after his death.
oh, okay. All right. Well, the point of what I'm trying to say is, I don't see how this person that's resembling Jesus Christ in Revelation 1 and 14 is that shining to where these details are apparently clear. I just don't see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, I think we've
I
spent.
mean, we spent like almost 30 minutes or an hour on this.
Yeah.
So did you want to go to Daniel 7 and 9?
We can go to Daniel 7 and 9, or we can go to something completely different. It's up to you.
Okay, well that's
How long have we? I don't even know how long we've been on so far. So
yeah. Well, it's been since like almost 2:30, so almost over 2 hours, I want to say.
right. Okay. I'm okay to continue, but I don't know about whether people who are watching or listening in might be getting a little bit bored.
They could be.
Seeing that we're spending such a huge amount of time on one particular verse, we've covered, I think, only 2 or 3 out of all of the. We haven't even got to the curses or anything like that yet.
Right. So did you want to deal with the curses, or do you want to deal with Israel being in the land right now?
I'm happy to go with the curses, because I think that the curses, the The thing with the people that are in Israel right now, I'm not even. I've done study on that, but I'm not dogmatic. I don't need those people that are in Israel. I do believe that the people in Israel are really Jews. We've discussed this on Facebook at times about the Ashkenazi Jews. If the Ashkenazi Jews are truly Ashkenaz that are in Israel right now, if they are from Ashkenaz, then they would not be from Shem, and I will openly admit that. There's no way that they could possibly be from Shem if they are Ashkenaz, because Ashkenaz is from Japheth, and there's no way around that.
Okay. All right.
So,
Let's do the verses then.
yeah, they would definitely have to be converts. I don't. There are two different types of Jews that are in the land, but I think that's maybe a topic on its another top. Seeing that we've been so long already, that might be a big discussion, and I'm not convinced that I would be able to give you a decent enough argument against them anyway.
Right. I see.
But what one thing I will say about that is that, like I said, I'm not dogmatic that the Jews that are in Israel right now are really Jews, but it isn't a dichotomy. It isn't an either or. It isn't you or them.
Okay.
By negating the fact that they are not Jews would not automatically make you a Jew or you an Israelite.
Okay. Well, that's a topic. That's a conversation we can have later. I'm always open for that dialogue. So, all right. Well, let's move on to. Huh?
Yeah, I'll need to study that one a little bit more, I think.
Okay. Because basically what I was going to do is I was going to stick with end time prophecies almost completely just to kind of deny that. But let's go to Deuteronomy 28 and let's see what you have.
Okay,
hold on before you start. And then we don't have a whole lot of people in the chat, but I kind of would, like for them to ask any questions if they have any questions for you or me at some point. So if a question comes up, then before we wrap it up, I would like to kind of address their questions.
I literally cannot see. I'm on the page, on your page, but I literally cannot see who's there, how many are there, how many are listening. So for me, I'm totally blind on that side.
That's not a lot of people. I mean, I think there's 4 people watching, maybe 3 or 4. I'm surprised because I haven't done anything on this channel in a while. I don't even have a big following, so just to have anybody watching is pretty. I mean, I'm pleased with that. Some people are getting edified one way or another. But
I was more. I wanted to just like I said to you in the conversation that we had prior to this, just like our little build up. I'm not dogmatic in the sense that I need the Jews to be the people that are in the land, and that the Israelites cannot be black. I'm certainly not one of those people that say, you can't be. I don't believe that the Bible supports it, but if you are, then I have no problem with that. It doesn't bother me whether I'm not a Jew. I'm not an Israelite by blood. I believe that I'm an Israelite through the Spirit, through Christ. That I'm Christ. I'm Abraham's seed through Christ. now I know that there are certain camps out there that believe that I'm just an Edomite, and I have no way of. I wanted to get to that as well, you know, the repentance of Edom and everything. So maybe we need to do this again. But I don't need the Israelites to be any specific color. I don't need to disprove the Israelites, you being an Israelite, for any specific reason. I don't have anything. It doesn't affect me in any way. I'm not an
Right.
Israelite anyway. So whoever the true Israelites are, it has no effect on me.
Okay.
I just want to know, you know, that's what I wanted to, you know, to see whether the Bible proves or disproves your claim. That's it.
Right. I got you. Okay.
If the Bible, you know, if through study and you can prove that you're the Israelites, then that's what I'll go with. I've studied the Bible for a long time now, and my doctrine, as I said to you, my doctrine has changed dramatically from the day that I first found God. I was in England at the time when I found God. My first church was a Trinitarian church, and that was what was told to me. You know, that the Trinity. I don't know what your stance on the Trinity is, but I totally reject the Trinity. I totally reject Catholicism outright. There are doctrines of the Catholic Church that I just reject as complete and utter heresy. The Trinity being one of them.
Yeah. I don't agree with the Trinity either.
Yeah.
So
So
we agree on that.
I don't need to be to prove anything for a specific reason. I'm classified by most Christians as a lone wolf because I go against the vast majority of Christianity. I don't adhere to a long-haired white man that walked the face of this earth. I don't believe he was a black man, but he certainly wasn't a white man. So I just wanted to say that before we carry on. I have no problems if you are if to say that you were an Israelite if I believed that you were one.
Right. Okay.
So from where I'm coming, the whole point of this was a discussion and to discuss what I had studied and for you to counter that. I'm here to learn as well.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm willing to, I've taken on board what you've said. I will re-listen to this again, and I will, because a lot of this has gone, although it's gone slow, a lot of it has gone quite fast in the way that we've talked and gone over things. I'm going to have to go back through what you've said again.
Likewise. Oh yeah.
And check, things that you've brought up that maybe I haven't looked at or I haven't taken into account in my own argument. And I need to look at what you've said and see whether, when I go back and analyze what you've said, whether any of that actually stacks up, and really does counteract what I've said. And if it does,
Right.
then I'll change what I've said.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say that before we get into the curses.
And I agree, because I need to go back over, the dialogue as well. And maybe if we decide to have another conversation, we can kind of recap on, this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways that this can go. And I'm just glad to have somebody, who has a different ideology as far as who the Israelites are and, just some other things that can have a peaceful dialogue without any emotionalisms or, feeling the need to, get disrespectful. You know what I mean? I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I'm just glad, we finally made it happen because we've been talking about it for a long time now.
Yeah, for quite a long time.
Yeah. So now to Deuteronomy 28.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
Um, literally anywhere that you would. I think for time wise, maybe we should just jump straight into 2868. But
Okay, well, let's go to 28 and 68.
yeah, the problem with jumping into that is that there's a lot of extra stuff that needs to. Maybe I can bring that up. I'll try and fit in some of the stuff that I need to say into verse 68 if I can. I'll try. But yeah, so for time wise, let's start at 68 and go from there.
Okay, Deuteronomy 28 and 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt not see it no more again. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. So, what do you want to start with this verse?
I think that the most important part there would be Egypt.
Okay, I think
With
just start at Egypt.
yeah, I think that because I'm going to take it that you're going to claim that Egypt means bondage.
Yep, that was a good assumption because you're right.
Yeah, is the assumption based off of experience, I think.
Right. So, hey, experience pays, right? So
Yeah.
let's take a look at the word Egypt, okay? And I got this other application that I want to use that basically talks about Egypt. So let me see here. Hold on one second. We'll pull it out. So tell me about. Okay, so tell me what you think Egypt means while I pull this up.
Okay. The word that is used there is Mitzrayim, and I believe that is Egypt. It's the physical land. When the Bible refers to Egypt, it is either the physical land or the physical people of that land, and that's what I believe that we are referencing literal Egypt.
Okay.
I expect that wasn't too much of a surprise to you either.
No. Yeah, I mean that's what I was thinking that you would come up with as far as Egypt being the actual land Egypt. So hold on, this thing is taking so dang on long. Hopefully, we just shut down on me. Well, basically, the word Mitzrayim, just going off the cusp of what I was studying before. Oh, here it goes. Hold on one second. Yeah, what I was studying before on Egypt. Egypt is basically, speaking of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. So, from what I was from my understanding and what I'm trying to bring up for you right now, um, it's the root word for that is Matsor. Are you familiar with the word Matsor?
Uh, let me go into. Um, have you got that open or no?
No, not yet. Okay, I got it now.
Okay.
All righty. Right here, you have the word Egypt, and what I did was I clicked on a word, and I'm looking for the definition, and this is what I came up with. Well, this is what the software presented for me. So basically, when you look at the Egyptian, hold on, let's see here. And there's sort of some type of hermetic hypothesis with this, but I'm gonna use it nonetheless. All right, so it says, and I'm gonna start at the second paragraph. The Egyptians belonged to the white race, and their original home is still a matter of dispute. Many scholars believe that it was in southern Arabia, and recent excavations have shown that the Valley of the Nile was originally inhabited by a low-class population, perhaps belonging to the Grecian stock, before the Egyptians of history entered. The ancient Egyptian language, of which the latest form is Coptic, is distantly connected with the Semitic family of speech. Now, this is the interesting part to make me look into this even more. Egypt consists geographically of two halves, the northern being the Delta, the southern being Upper Egypt, between Cairo and the First Cataract. The Old Testament, northern and lower Egypt, is called Masr, the fortified land. And where the AV mistranslate defense and besieged places, while southern Egypt or upper Egypt is Pathros, the Egyptian Pateros, or the land of the south. But the whole country is generally mentioned under the dual name of Mizraim. So the actual name Mizraim isn't the actual name of Egypt according to this, which means the two Mazors. Are you following me?
Kind of.
Okay, so basically, Mizraim or Egypt is the two Mazors. So now you got to figure out, now we got to determine what the word Mazors mean. Okay, so now I'm back to blue letter. Okay, you see Mizraim right there?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so like you're saying, the double straits right here, the double straits. That's northern Egypt and lower Egypt. And you see right here, the root word, the etymology, it says dual of Matsor. So it starts at Matsor, and that's the actual name for Egypt. Okay, that's the actual name. Matsor is the name for Egypt. And it means siege and entrenchment. And then you see besieged places right here, defense and fortified. But when you look up the etymology of that word, where it actually came from, you see the ma and the sore. The sore, the etymology of that word is siege, enclosed, entrenchment, siege work, enclosure. And somewhere else it was saying to bind. So when I look at the word Egypt, and let's see, I think the other one was saying go to Isaiah 11 and 1 or 1 and 11. I'm not sure. So I'm looking for where I saw the word binded earlier, but can't remember where that was at. But I guess what I'm getting at is the word doesn't mean what we thought it meant. So, and I hate that I didn't save it, but let's see if I can find it here. Okay, well, I don't see what I was looking for, but the word Egypt, as we see, is the two Mazars, which means besieged and entrenched city. So it clearly it clearly is telling us what what we're thinking is pretty much true. Because what does the word besiege mean?
I think you're really clutching at straws, to be honest, on the whole.
No, that's you see me walk through it now, LJ. Don't say that. You see me walk through it, and I went through the
Yeah,
etymology of the words, and
yeah.
we seen that the word
And
Mizraim.
when Egypt is referred to over and over and over, the it is referring to the land of Egypt. It is not referring to the bondage or the captivity. When the Bible refers to captivity in Egypt over and over, we see Deuteronomy 5:6, Micah 6:4, Judges 6:8, Joshua 24:17. These are all Jeremiah 34:13. These are all verses that clearly state the land of Egypt, the house of bondage.
Right.
When when they are when bondage is referenced along with Egypt, you have two different words. The bondage is abadim, uh, which is a completely different word. The bondage that is referred to in as in the people that were in bondage, they were in Egypt in bondage. Two different words, two separate references. In all, you can we can I can show you those verses again. Egypt, bondage, separate words, separate reference. They brought you Deuteronomy 5 and 6. Let's just go with that one. Deuteronomy 5 and 6.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. Two separate reference. There is
How?
Mitzrayim is Egypt, Abadim is bondage.
Well, how are they two different references?
Because you can be in Egypt and you can be in bondage. They are two different things. You can
How?
be in
I mean,
you can be because you can be in Egypt without being in bondage, and you can be in bondage without being in Egypt. The two are referenced together because they were in Egypt in bondage.
but we're
So they
seeing
are
that. Oh,
the
go
two
ahead.
are linked together. When Egypt is referenced, they are linked together. Deuteronomy 28:68 does not reference bondage. There's no bondage referenced in that verse. It's Egypt, the physical land of.
Well, it is kind of referencing bondage because it's saying there you would be sold as bond men and bond women. So you do have that same language in the verse.
Yeah, yeah. That part is referencing the bondage. They will be taken back to physical Egypt, where they will be sold as bondmen and bondwomen, where they will be taken back to Egypt. Now, it also one we have here. You are again. You're going to say that by the way whereof I spake unto thee. That's or sorry, thou shalt see it no more. And you're going to say that that's Israel, yeah, or the promised land, that you don't see the land anymore.
No, we're going to say, well, what I'm going to say is that you wouldn't see that bondage and that hard bondage that was in Egypt anymore. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah, and God is the Bible is very clear that the reference there, God said you would not see Egypt again.
Okay, but see, right here in the verse that you brought out, Deuteronomy 5 and 6, and like you said, there's probably like 13 verses that are saying the same thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's plenty of verses that say bondage and Egypt, land of Egypt, the land of Egypt. I brought you out of the land of Egypt, and I redeemed you from the servitude that you did in there. Micah 6:4 is basically saying that. Each verse, I brought you up from the land of Egypt, and then
comma.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it, I mean, and most people, when they look at something, and when it's repeated and repetitiously more than one time, and then it's repeated like 13 times, and I'm just saying 13, but if it's repeated,
maybe more.
but if it's repeated at least 13 times, where it's saying, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, comma, house of bondage, that's like defining the word Egypt. I mean, I don't see how you don't see that this sentence is defining what Egypt is.
Because quite clearly before that we have the land of Egypt, the house of bondage.
Okay, right, and that's where Israel was in bondage at,
Yeah,
because
and you can be brought out of Egypt and still stay in bondage. You can be taken out of bondage and remain in Egypt. The two are referenced because the two are being referenced. Why then here are we got two being referenced? How many times? 13 times you said that it's got Egypt, house of bondage. Why have we in Deuteronomy 28:68 suddenly jumped to one?
what do you mean jump to one?
We're only referencing Egypt now. We haven't got the bondage. We've got the bondage being explained that there you will be sold. You will be sold in the land of Egypt. We've got the land of Egypt as a reference singular. We don't have the house of bondage.
Right, because it's been. I mean, put it like this: if right now I hear a song or I see a vehicle that I think is nice, I might say, "Look at that vehicle. That vehicle is fire." But now, most people that know me or that are in my circle, they know that I mean that's a nice vehicle. But even today, somebody in Britain, like maybe an older family, if they never heard that type of language before, and I say that car is fire, they're gonna be like, "What car? What car is on fire?" They're not gonna
Okay.
know what I'm talking about. In the same term, if I say fire today, in 100 years down the line, if it's recorded and they say, "Oh, he said that car is fire," I wonder why. I mean, why was the car on fire? So Israel had been grilled so much about the house of bondage because it's like every chance they were reminded that they were brought out of the house of bondage. That the same way when I was younger, if my dad tell me if I misbehave, that I'm gonna get a whooping, and then one day he says, "Go in my room and get the belt," I know exactly what he means. I know if I go in there and get that belt and bring him that belt, that it's about to be trouble for me. So to me, that's the same type of language because I have been through that situation more than once. If I have never gotten a whooping before and he said, "Go in the room and get the belt," I'm going to say, "Oh, yeah, sure. I'm not going to take my time. I'm not going to cry. I'm just about to go back there and get that belt." But if he would have whooped me after that belt, I would have been like in shock, like, "Why did you do that?" But by me being whipped so many times for doing things that I knew was wrong, and then he instructed me to go in there and get that belt, I knew it was on and popping. And that's the same thing that when I read Deuteronomy 28:68, I see the same context because it's been grilled so much that I brought you out of Egypt. I brought you out of Egypt from the house of bondage. So if he sends you back to Egypt, you know that you're going back into bondage. And that's the way I see it.
Okay. Can you tell me how many times the word Egypt or the words Egypt and bondage are used before Deuteronomy 28:68?
Okay, well, let's look. Quite a few. All right, I see 10.
Okay, yeah, that's more than what I actually thought there would be, but I can certainly see what you're saying on that. I disagree with it. I can certainly see why you might think that he said that. I do have to question why he continued to use Egypt in bondage after Deuteronomy 28:68, where quite clearly they understand that all he has to say is Egypt. But after that, we continue to see Egypt and bondage. It's only in this one time that we see Egypt being referred to as bondage, unless you can find another reference to Egypt meaning bondage. What is it so specific about Deuteronomy 28:68 that God needs to only use Egypt here?
Well, because that's where, I guess that's where we had our first bondage from, and that's where he first rescued us from. So, so if that's like where it all started, to me, that would make sense to reference Egypt.
Okay, so this is God telling the Israelites that they're going to go back into physical bondage, and the only time that he's referring to the physical bondage that they are going to go back into as a curse, he doesn't refer to it as bondage, but just Egypt.
Well, then he said, but then he said, when you're there, you will be sold into bondage. So basically, it's the same
Okay,
context.
so you're going to be, I'm going to take you into bondage where you're going to be sold into bondage.
Yeah, I'm gonna take you to the house of bondage where you're gonna be sold.
Okay, I can kind of get my head around that, kind of.
The only reason why, if there was like only one reference of Egypt in the house of bondage, then we already know that wouldn't be enough to stand on. But right here, you have it being spoken of 8 times in Torah. Then you have it being spoken of in Joshua and one in Judges. So that's a big deal, LJ. That's a
I
big.
I agree that if that is the way that you think that God referred to Egypt in that particular verse, I can see how you can, how you can work that into that. I can see how you can do it. I don't agree that God would, in just one verse, use Egypt, whereas in all the other verses he separates bondage, which is clearly a different word than Egypt, that he references, I've brought you out of the land of Egypt, and I took you out of the house of bondage. So I see that there are two specific different references between Egypt and the bondage. And I do believe that we're talking about a physical land of Egypt in Deuteronomy 28:68. I believe that was fulfilled in 70 AD when the Romans took off the Israelites into captivity. They took them back into Egypt. They took them by ship into Egypt. So I do believe that was literally fulfilled then. Where do I want to go with this? There is a. Sorry about this. I'm just trying to find where. My next point. Okay, so we're talking about the transatlantic slave trade fulfills this verse. Yeah, is that your contention that the transatlantic slave trade fulfills that verse, where they're taken back, where you were taken to America?
Well, I'm gonna tell you first why I don't believe 70 AD fulfills it.
Okay.
I don't think 70 AD fulfills it because, first of all, Egypt then was a Roman territory.
Yeah.
So, first of all, that isn't the same land of Egypt that Israel was in before, because there was no Pharaoh in Egypt in 70 AD. Everything was run by, but Caesar, was Caesar still alive in 70 AD?
Pass.
Well, that's neither here nor there, but you get what I'm saying. Basically, the ruler of Egypt was actually a Roman. Okay, so that's the first part where I disagree that 70 AD was the fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28. The second reason I think it doesn't fulfill Deuteronomy and 28 is because you already had Israelites in Egypt. So if Israel is already in Egypt, how are they being brought back to Egypt? To me, that doesn't make sense. If we didn't,
you need all of the Israelites to be taken back to Egypt in order to fulfill that verse.
no, what I'm saying is there were already communities of Israelites already in Egypt. And when
Yeah.
I say communities, they were already occupying part of the land. So they were
Okay.
all, hold on, Andrew. So they were
Yeah.
already already there. So to me, that can't fit a prophecy because it's supposed to be in a land that we haven't that's strange and foreign to us. And or I mean strange and foreign to us. And when I say that is, we're not supposed to be there. Okay. And we were already there.
Yeah,
So
but they weren't meant to be there. They were already not meant to be there. They're meant to be in the promised land. They're meant to be following God. Wherever the Israelites are, if they're not in the promised land, they're not where they're meant to be.
Oh, I agree. Well, he said, well, wherever I send you, or what. So basically, wherever we occupy land is our own, unless he said the land that I gave your fathers. But what I'm getting at is we were already there. So if you're there, how can you be brought there again?
Because the people that were taken there were in the promised land. There were people that at that time, there were many times that obviously Israel went into bondage, and each time that they went off into bondage, there were remnants that remained in the lands that they went off into bondage. They were meant to return back to the promised land. So when they were not in the promised land, they were going against God in the sense that they were not returning to the land that God had given them, and that was where they were meant to be. The Israelites were meant to be in the promised land, following God. So anytime that they were outside of the promised land, they were not following God. And so, one of the arguments I'm sure that that you're going to say about the Israelites and stuff is that the Israelites are called Gentiles in the New Testament because they've gone against God. So as far as they're concerned, they're no longer they're physical Israel, but they're not following God. So they're not part of that covenant with God because they're not following him. So when God takes the people that were in the land, they were following God, and he takes them out of that land. It's those that are being referred to as going back to Egypt, and not the ones that are already not following God outside of Egypt, outside of the promised land. That would be where I would think that. One problem I've got with the fulfillment of the transatlantic slave trade is that we have to remember. This is where I said we might run out of time, and I wanted to go back to the beginning of Deuteronomy 28. The whole curses and blessings of Deuteronomy 28 were for the Israelites when they entered into the promised land. All the curses, they took effect when they were in the promised land. They didn't take effect until they entered the promised land. The fulfillment of all of those curses must happen inside of the promised land. And if we go to verse 52, it clearly states that that God would bring against them a nation, and they would call upon their high gates and their walls, and they wouldn't be good enough, and they would be taken from the land. That was fulfilled in the Assyrian captivity, where they were taken from the land. It was fulfilled in the Babylonian captivity, where they were taken from the land. It was fulfilled in the Grecian captivity. They were taken from the land. And it was fulfilled in the Roman captivity when they were taken from the land. The transatlantic slave trade did not take Israelites from the promised land. They were already outside of it.
Okay, in verse 52, where does it say promised land? Or does it say it at the top?
So he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until the high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest, throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. This is the land that they were meant to be in.
Okay. We'll continue because I got a few things to add to that.
Yeah, that's fine. So when the curses were given, Moses gave these curses. He gave the law. They didn't keep the law until they came into the promised land. He gave the curses and the blessings that happened when they came into the promised land. If they didn't keep they didn't follow God, they didn't keep the covenant with God, he would remove them from the promised land. Now, once they were removed from the promised land, that was it. The curse was fulfilled. There were many curses that happened, like the curse in the field, which the Hebrew Israelites like to say that the black people in America were forced to work in the field picking cotton, and that fulfills the curse. No, it doesn't. There's nothing in the verse that says about you will be cursed in the land, meaning that you would go into slavery and pick cotton. It wasn't cursed while you were in slavery. It was cursed in the land. Your land, the land that they were in, was be cursed. It wouldn't produce the fruit. It wouldn't produce. The land was cursed. Their land, the land that they were taken into, not being cursed. We have to take the opposite, the blessing. If being cursed in the field means that you're going to go and be forced to work in the field, does the blessing that you will prosper in the field mean that you don't have to work there? No, it means that if you follow God, he will bless the land. The land will be fruitful. If you go, that is I'm sorry, I'm lost on where the verse is, but I think it is verse 16, the cursed in the land. If we go to then verse 17 and verse 18, it tells you, it fulfills that. It tells you that you will be, that the produce from the land would not produce. That's all that means. It's the land that they were in. It doesn't mean that you're going to go into the cursed in the field means that you're going to be taken off into slavery. That's a completely different curse. There's nothing in the verse to say that you're going to be taken off into slavery. And we have the blessing that is the opposite in verse 4. And that's the blessing, that the fruit of thy ground and the fruit of thy cattle, the increase of thy kine and the flocks of thy sheep. That's the blessing. It's the opposite of the curse. Okay, I'll let you respond to that before we carry on.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to deal with you said, okay, well, you said a lot of stuff. You said that Israel.
I did.
Yeah,
sorry, I apologize.
yeah.
I went off and had a little too much to say, maybe.
No, it's okay. You said the Babylonian captivity fills certain aspects of Deuteronomy 28, as well as the Assyrian captivity fulfilled certain aspects of Deuteronomy 28. Certain aspects don't really qualify for the entire Deuteronomy 28. And then you said that Israel were in their own land when Israel was taken out of Jerusalem and sent to Egypt. But Israel wasn't really in control of Israel. So we were in a land, but Israel wasn't controlled by Israel. So it's kind of hard to say that 70 AD fulfills that, because we were supposed to be in control of the entire land. But when I think it was Peter came and asked Christ, are we going to pay tribute? And then Christ said something about does children of the I'm just paraphrasing. Does the children does the king charge tribute to his own children? They said no. So he was like, are the children free? So it's kind of hard to say when Christ was on the earth that Israel was free, that we were in our own land, because we possibly were, well, we were in our own land, but we were not under our own leadership. And you said something about a remnant was always left behind from where Israel left. That's normally the case, but that's not the case with Egypt. There were no remnant in Egypt left behind because they all left and went through the Exodus. So there was not any remnant of Israel left behind in Egypt. And then you brought out the point, you said that, these curses would happen to us if we were in our land. Well, I just went over that we were in Israel, but we weren't under rulership in our own land. And when you go to Deuteronomy 14, go to Deuteronomy 14, and then let's go to verse 24. Well, let's start at verse 22. This is about tithes. Thou shalt truly tithe all thy increase of thy seed that the field bringeth forth year by year. And thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there. The tithe of the corn, the tithe of thy corn, of thy wine, of thine oil, of thy firstlings, of thy herd, of thy flock, that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. But this next verse is pivotal. If the way be too long for thee, so that thou art not able to carry it, or if the place be too far from thee, which the Lord shall choose to set his name there, when the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, then thou shalt turn it into money and bind up the money in thy hand, and thou shalt go into the place which the Lord thy God chose, and thou shalt there bestow the money for whatsoever thy soul lusteth after of. So basically, what you're seeing here is that if the children were too far from the land that the Lord put his name, did that mean that since they were out of Jerusalem, did that mean that whatever land they were in, it wasn't their land?
The land that God gave the Israelites was not just Jerusalem.
Right, but here we see that. But here we say
they had to
right,
be
but
in the land that God had given them. Yes, they had to be in that land.
okay, so now we just agree that they didn't have to be in Jerusalem. So right now we see where it says, if the way be too long for thee. So when you said in the land, when Israel had got land in West Africa, are you saying that they were in a land that was not given to them?
When they were in West Africa, yeah, that's not their land.
So what justifies their land?
The land that God promised Abraham.
But right here we just saw in verse 24, if you're so far away from, see, you're talking about the land of your fathers. We don't see in this verse. No, yeah, you are, because the land of your fathers is the land that was promised to Abraham. But we see that here, when it was concerning tithes, he made a decree right there to where if you're too far to travel with all your tenths, so that means if you're too far, you can't be in Jerusalem. You're in another land that's too far off. So if you're in a land that's that far off, is that saying that it's not their land?
Is Jerusalem the only land, the only city that the Israelites were given?
No, wherever the Lord gave them was their land.
Right. So the land that he had given them, when they had to carry their tithes, what did they have to carry?
They had to carry the first tenth. They had to carry everything. The
Right.
first tenth.
So they had to carry the tenth of the produce of the land. This is the produce of the land that they were in, the promised land that they were given. They had to give the first tenth of what they produced in that land. How big was that land? We're talking about they've got to carry 10% of everything that they have acquired, produced. They have to take 10% off. If you had to go from one city to another, if it was 20 miles, that might be a little much to carry. So what they were allowed to do was sell what they had produced. They could sell that to get money. They would then go to Jerusalem and they would buy back the stuff that they had basically sold. Then they would give their tithe. This doesn't mean that if you're in West Africa, you have to come all the way back to Jerusalem.
Well, it does mean that. It does mean that.
No, because they weren't keeping the tithe when they were outside of the land.
Huh?
Once they were outside of when the Israelites were taken from their land, they were not keeping the tithe. This is only for when they're in their land. When they're in their land, they tithe the produce of their land. If they're in West Africa, they're not producing anything from their land. They're no longer tithing. There is no tithe for somebody that is outside of the land. There's no 10% of their own produce from their own land. The land that they were given, it was divided up between the 12 tribes. That is their land. The land that they were given is the portion, or sorry, the Levites weren't given any portion of land, obviously. So we're talking 11 tribes. But the 11 tribes were given their land. They produced in their land. They tithed from their land. When they were outside of the land, they didn't tithe. They didn't produce anything. So they wouldn't be taking a tithe from West Africa to Jerusalem. We're not talking about the distance there. We're talking about the distance of cities that were in non-walking distance, obviously everything was in walking distance at that time. Everybody walked, but what I mean by that is we're not talking about something that is a quick and easy route or quick walk. This might have taken them days to get, and they didn't want to carry all of that stuff. This was produce of the land. I don't see how you can see anything other than that in that at all.
Okay. So that's how you. Okay. So as long as, well, it was my understanding as long as there were Levites and if they had a land, then we still had to give produce. So I mean that's something I could come back to later. I just have to research it a little more.
Can you show biblically or even non-biblically that the Israelites who were outside of the land were tithing back to Jerusalem?
No, I said I would have to do. Yeah, I would have to do more research on it.
Okay. Okay. So you said that about that they weren't. The Israelites, they were under the Romans, so they were technically under the Roman Empire. Yeah, so they were in their land, but they weren't they weren't owners of their own land.
They weren't free according to Christ.
Yeah, so they were in their land, but they were not controlling their land.
Right.
Right. Okay. But the verse 49 states that that the Lord would bring a nation against them. So once the nation had been brought against them, then we can have a fulfillment of verse 68. The Lord would bring the nation against them. There's no time limit of how long that the nation they would be under that nation that was brought against them. The nation was brought against them. They were under that nation. They were taken away from the land. A fulfillment of both of those verses. And the fact is that the Romans took the Israelites by ship. They took them to many different places, but they took them back into Egypt, where they were sold. And we have Josephus and Munter, who both agree that that this happened, and we also have, I think it was Munter and not Josephus. I think it's Munter who attests to the fact that they were sold to Egypt, but due to the numbers of slaves that were taken, there were people they couldn't find buyers. And if we go to verse 68, that's exactly what it says. And no man shall buy you. Now I know that the common thing here is to try and say that this is redeem, but redeem is a completely and utterly different word than to buy. Buy means to buy. No man would buy you. There's nothing about redemption in that verse. They would be sold unto their enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man should buy you.
Okay.
Now I know, like I said, I know that redemption is often used by the camps. I don't know. I don't want to say which ones because I think I know which ones, but I don't want to say one that is incorrect, just in case it is incorrect on that. So yeah, they would be taken for me. Deuteronomy 28:68 is that you would be taken from your land. You would be taken to Egypt by physical ship, and you would be sold, and nobody would buy you. The transatlantic slave trade took African people from Africa to America. There's no Egypt, there's no land, and they certainly did buy them. I fail to see how 2868 is fulfilled by the transatlantic slave trade in any way, shape, or form. If for that to have happened, then Israel would have had to have been reconciled back into their land after 70 AD, which we know for a fact that they were not. They were not taken back to the land, so they would have had to have gone back into the promised land for that to have been a refulfillment of that verse, of that curse. The curse was fulfilled, and it hasn't been fulfilled since, because that was the last time that they were in their land. We can talk about 1948. Well, I'm not sure if that's a reconciliation back, but it certainly wasn't done by the time that the transatlantic slave trade took hold.
Okay. So I kind of want to respond to first where you said no man shall buy you. The word buy is kana. And then when you go to, I think it's Nehemiah 5 and 8, this is the word right here, kana. Hebrews 70:69. Let's go to Nehemiah 5 and 8. All right, 5 and 8. You see, okay, and I said unto them, we after our ability have redeemed, and we're going to find out what this word redeem means, our brethren, the Jews, which were sold unto the heathen. And will you even sell your brethren, or shall they be sold unto us? Then held they peace and found nothing to answer. Now let's see what that word redeems mean. Redeemed means. It's the same Hebrew word 7069, which is kana, which means to redeem. So it is the same word. They're not two totally different words. They are the same word, to buy or to redeem. So nobody's going to redeem us from our bondage. And then I think you went down to Deuteronomy 28 and was it 52?
Yeah, Deuteronomy 28:52, which would be inside their gates.
Now hold on, you went to 49. Let's speak on 49.
Okay, yeah, I did do 49.
The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, and from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Okay, so as I said earlier, we were in a Roman province, which Jerusalem was a Roman province. So if we were in a Roman province, that's not a nation whose tongue we did not understand, because we understood their language well. Even Paul was they asked him, can you speak Greek? So we understood the language of the land we were in very well. And it says from the end of the earth, a nation against, hold on, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth. Well, that doesn't sound like the end of the earth to me, when Rome was already occupying Jerusalem. So they pretty much just took us out of Jerusalem and took us to Egypt. So they didn't come as swift as the eagle's flight because they were already there. We understood their language. So basically, Deuteronomy 28 and 49 is not fulfilled in 70 AD because 2 out of the 2, well, 3 out of the 3 does not fit that. That's like trying to fit a peg in a square hole. It just doesn't work.
Okay, can I respond to that, or
Yeah, go ahead.
You have more?
No, go ahead. No, I want you to respond to that, and then I have a little more here shortly.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The fact is that Deuteronomy 28:49 is not linked to 28:68 in the sense of that one would be fulfilled immediately after the other. Before Rome came and occupied Jerusalem, they were not occupied by Rome. So the land, the nation that was brought against them was a nation that they didn't understand, that they weren't under at the time. They didn't speak the tongue. They wouldn't have spoken Latin at that time. So when Deuteronomy 28:49 was fulfilled by the Roman occupation, the nation that was brought against them was a nation from far that they didn't understand the tongue. At that time, they didn't. Now, the occupation happened, but we don't need Deuteronomy 28:68 to happen at the exact same time as 28:49. The nation that was brought against them came, occupied the land. They then rejected Jesus. They were then taken away from the land. 28:68 is a fulfillment after 28:49, after the nation that came from afar, that they didn't understand the language. You don't need the two to happen at the same time in order to be fulfilled.
Okay, so does 51 happen at the same time as 49?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And he should eat the fruit of thy cattle. Yeah.
It's still talking about that nation coming from far.
Yeah, I would say that nation that took that land, that came and was there, that's what they would do. Yeah.
Okay, so did Rome do that, or did Rome work with Israel when they came?
Sorry, you broke up.
Okay, so when Rome occupied the land, did they fulfill that prophecy when it happened? In what was it? First century BC. Did Rome eat up their cattle and destroy to where we were destroyed?
You don't need that they would be they were destroyed as a people at that time. Yeah, they were not, as you said, they were not in control of themselves. So Rome was in control of them. They were here. That doesn't thou will be destroyed. That's a future prophecy. That's going to happen. That they're going to be there. They're going to eat the fruit of their cattle until they be destroyed. Now, when they were destroyed, which is a continuation, it's something that is happening. They are being destroyed until thou be destroyed. They will do this until you will be destroyed. That is when, in 70 AD, when they destroyed Israel. Until that point, they were destroying Israel or destroying the promised land. And it was until they would be destroyed. It wouldn't, verse 51 wouldn't cease until it happened, until it was fulfilled.
Okay, so now that's where you have your problem at right there.
Okay.
Because when you read on, it says, which also shall not leave thee corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or the flocks of thy sheep. So it said, so as a result of them eating they shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall leave you nothing. So but they were not like locusts eating up all the cattle, drinking up all the wine until they were destroyed. I mean, you read the history. The reason why they destroyed and sacked Jerusalem was a result of a rebellion.
Yeah.
So that had nothing to do. So once they occupied the land, everything was, well, as far as Rome knew, everything was in harmony up until the rebellion. So they didn't rebel because they didn't have anything to eat. They didn't rebel because they didn't have any oil or any flock. They
No,
rebelled because they wanted to take their land back.
because this was a progressive happening. They had to pay tribute to Caesar at that time. So Caesar was taking his portion from the land, from the people. It was something that was happening. They were having to pay. So this is when it says until they'll be destroyed. So they were doing this. They rebelled. They were then destroyed, where everything was taken from them, and it was the fulfillment of when they were when the destruction came. The final destruction was when they were destroyed. But up until that point, they were destroying them. That's why they rebelled against it, because they were being destroyed. They were being fleeced. So they rebelled against that oppression that they were under. They were then destroyed. They lost. So the
Well,
destruction came through being destroyed slowly. They rebelled against that, and they were finally destroyed.
well, that's not really in any of the historical records. And before Rome occupied Jerusalem, did Jerusalem was Jerusalem an independent city and was Israel an independent nation, or were we already under the captivity or another country?
In before Rome,
Yeah.
um, well, before Rome, the Grecians had come, and under Ptolemy the second, I believe, was it the first?
I believe it was I believe it was one of them. But you're
It was,
right. My whole point for bringing that up is a nation came from far against thee. They didn't come
yeah.
against us. They came against the Greeks because we were already under the occupation of the Greeks. So it's still not. You still can't try to fit that square peg into that peg into a square hole. You can't do that because at no point before the Roman occupation did Israel control Israel. So
That
it's just not
was
going to work.
the Grecian captivity was a fulfillment. It was a nation that was brought against them. We don't, in each one of the captivities, not all of the curses were fulfilled in each one. During the Assyrian captivity, they weren't taken by ships. So you don't need every single curse to be fulfilled each time. These are curses that would happen, but we're reading them as if like they're on a kind of timeline where this this curse will come first, this curse will come second, this then will be followed by this one. In the Assyrian and the Babylonian captivities, I don't believe that that ships were used. So under those both times, they had a nation that was brought against them, and they destroyed them. But ships weren't used, so we don't need every single verse to apply to every single time. The Grecian captivity that happened. Now, I'm not 100%, so I cannot say whether whether Greece was actually in control of Israel at the time. I can't say that. I don't know. They certainly took Israelites captive, but I'm not sure that they left a remnant there in control of Israel. You might know that. I don't.
Well, it's kind of in the Apocrypha, and I haven't really got into the Apocrypha like that, but the last book of the Old Testament left off with Israel being in the Persian Mede captivity.
Right.
And then
Okay.
the Apocrypha speaks on the Greeks and then the Romans taking over. And then with the New Testament, then you have the Romans already occupying the land. So, with that being said, I mean, even at the Persian Medes, we didn't have our own land. So, we didn't have our own land for quite some time. And it's kind of hard to make Deuteronomy 28 go over from enemy to enemy to enemy because it's saying he. So I'm taking it as one enemy because if it was saying then he should do this and then another one should do this and then another one should do that, then or if it's just saying this will happen by one enemy, this will happen by another enemy, and this will happen by another enemy, sort of like the order of what Daniel lays out about the different beasts. That's letting you know that there were multiple captivities. But Deuteronomy doesn't give you that type of hint that you will be going through this from 5 different captivities. And to try to say all 5 captivities, we're going to bundle them all in one. We're going to take a piece of this captivity and add it here. We're going to take a piece of this captivity and add it there. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all.
So the curses in you're saying that the curses in Deuteronomy 28:68 are only referencing the transatlantic slave trade. They didn't happen at any other time.
Well, you have portions of it that taking place all over, but all of these took place in the transatlantic slave trade.
So we can take portions of the curses and apply them to different captivities.
But portions don't make a fulfillment. It's when all of it's fulfilled under one event. You can't show any other one event that fulfilled all of these. And plus, the curses of Israel was supposed to be perpetual.
Yeah, the perpetual side of it is that every time that they went back into the land forevermore, that if they didn't follow God, then the curses would reapply. They wouldn't continue to happen to them after they were removed from the land. Once they've been removed, then they can't be removed from the land because they already are removed from the land. You can't have a perpetual captivity happening after the captivity. So you can't say that, well, they were taken into captivity during the Roman time and then they were taken into another captivity, because you're now applying a second captivity, which you just said we can't do, on top of the first captivity.
No, correction, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said you can't take bits and pieces and apply it to different captivities. In fact, you're doing that because Israel was already in captivity of the Persian Medes, and then they became grandfathered into the Greeks because the Greeks defeated the Persian Medes, and then they got grandfathered into the Romans because the Romans captured, destroyed the Greeks. So, in other words, that's what you're doing. You're saying that they were in captivity and then got recaptured while they were in captivity, and then got recaptured again, and then in captivity, and then it sort of fulfilled everything. I didn't say that.
Well, what you did say is that they can't have successive captivities.
No,
So
I
you
didn't.
can't be taken from the captivity that had already happened from the Greek captivity. It couldn't then be that the Romans took over that captivity. Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is you can't say okay, verses 16 through 30 happened during the Persian Mede. And I'm just using that order just so to be more simple.
Yeah.
Or you can say the Greek captivity fulfilled 48 through 54. And then you can say, okay, well, the Romans fulfilled 38 to 53. And then 55 to 68. I mean, it doesn't work like that. I mean, at least I don't see it working like that because the way Daniel is laid out, it seems like if it's going to use if we're going to use different captivities to fulfill it overall, then it would be like that type of language that would be
I th
added.
I think the Roman captivity. Now I'm gonna have to look into it because, like I said, I don't know about when the Grecians came and took the Israelites captive. I I'm not positive that the Grecians took Israel as they became um, they became rulers of Israel. I honestly don't know that. That's something I should know, but I don't know, and I'll look that up. If they did take Israel and they were in control of Israel, then I can. I still don't think that there's a problem with the Romans being the fulfillment because I think the Romans fulfill because the fact that they were still in the land would fulfill the fact that they were taken from their land in the Roman captivity. I think the Roman captivity fulfills all the curses, but I don't see a problem either way. Actually, whether the Greeks were in charge of Israel, which I don't know if they were, with the Romans taking over that captivity anyway, because that would be another nation that was brought against them, and it would fulfill all of those curses. Josephus, I think it is, that talks about the Israelites eating their own children, which is verse 53, 54.
Yep,
53, yeah.
53.
So
Yep.
they would eat the flesh of their own body. Was that fulfilled in the transatlantic slave trade? I don't know. That is a genuine question.
I mean, I
I've
don't I
looked,
don't know either.
yeah, I've looked for that information, but I can't find it. So if we're going, I can find it for Josephus, who wrote about that the Israelites ate their own children. That was also fulfilled in Second Kings, I think, um, where the Israelites were in famine and one of the two women ate their own children, or one ate their child and the other one refused to give up her child after that. I'm sure that's in Second Kings, but it was certainly fulfilled in the Roman captivity. I cannot find anybody referencing that fulfillment, which, as you've stated, that every curse must be fulfilled.
Yeah,
So if every curse must be fulfilled, then you must show evidence of verse 53 being fulfilled during the transatlantic slave trade. Would
that's
that be
true.
would that be true? Yeah, that's
I mean,
fair.
yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But I know one of the
I
I think
genuinely
one of
don't
the
know
I
that.
think one of the
Genuinely.
camps did speak on that. You know, it was like a few of the tribes in Africa that took on the customs of, being cannibals. So I would have to look more into that. So right now, I would say, okay, you have that one, until I could get more information on that part of it. But it's
I,
gonna be
I, I need to be shown that because, like I said, I've searched for it and I can't find any information on it. So I'm not saying that it didn't happen. It's just something that I haven't personally found. I was maybe hoping that you might know something, but you know, it doesn't necessarily disqualify the captivity. It may have happened. So
Yep. So I mean, there's so much more to go over, and now we're about to go into 4 hours with something
yeah,
we said. we weren't gonna do.
Yeah.
And I think we talked our audience out the door because there's only two people or two viewers now, and I don't see any questions really. But let's
Yeah.
see here. In search of Yah, he was basically saying, and I'm thinking this is talking about let's see what he's talking about. The Bible and the physical migration supported. You have zeal, so one can't simply say he wasn't black. He was an Israelite. Black is not a skin color or nationality. Okay, so he's talking about Christ. Israel is many colors, but at the time they were mostly brown people. Now they are darker due to the interaction with the women of Ham on the west coast of Africa, but we kept our features. Then he brought up Judges 6 and 8, which is uh, talking about Egypt. And he said because the Greek word Egypt isn't there in Judges 6 and 8. Then he says Mizraim means bondage in the Hebrew, but Egypt doesn't mean that in English without identifying it. So he said the curses will follow us. The British found cannibals amongst, oh, well, he answered that just now. The British found cannibals amongst the tribes.
Okay.
Even in South Asia, the islanders that were in slavery as well were cannibals. He got a question. Okay, in search of Yah, what's your question? And while we wait on him to ask his question, I'm going to read back through and see if there is any more questions.
I'm shocked that we've spent nearly 4 hours on this, and we've like kind of scratched the surface.
Right.
There's so much more that we need to that we could have gone through, so much more. But it's been interesting. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah.
I've learned, as you know, I came here with my own argument, and I've learned more. You know what your argument is. There are different arguments that you've got than some of the camps that I've seen, and many of the other people that I've argued against. You know, on Facebook. It's really hard to have a proper conversation on Facebook because you know we
Correct.
have lives and stuff, and it gets in. You know, you come back to it 5 minutes later, and you know 25 different people have commented, and it kind of gets lost, and it's very hard to follow. So there's much information that I've ascertained and listened to that I, like I said, I'm going to go back over and see whether I can counter it, whether it supports your claim or whether it doesn't. I genuinely am in search of the truth, whatever
Me
it
too.
is.
Me
I
too,
don't
Elder.
really I don't really care what the truth is. I just want the truth, and that's it. So this
Okay,
has
now
been
in search of Yah, he did bring well, he commented again, so let me see what he says. Okay, we can't limit the slavery of Israel to the transatlantic slave trade because during the same time frame, Israel was enslaved in other parts of the world by Europe, for example, South Asia, India, and East Africa. Okay.
yeah. I think that kind of the whole 12 tribe camp thing, and I don't know whether you ascribe to that. I think that totally gets blown out of the water when it's analyzed. There were far, you know, Israelites were spread about through the captivities. To say that they all went to America is some of them, some group camps, and I don't know again which ones they are. Some ascribe that only the ones that went to Africa are Israelites. Other ones say that, you know, the Puerto Ricans and the Native Americans were all Israelites as well. I think the fact that Israelites, if they all went to America, then they certainly weren't spread all about the world, from one end of the world, the earth, to the other. So,
well, that would be true.
um,
That would be true.
and I
And
don't
see,
think that you can. I don't think you can say only the Israelites, only the Black Americans that are in America are the true Israelites. I think that's whichever camps that is, which I'm not sure, but that clearly cannot be correct, because there's no way that God can bring back the remnant from all corners of the earth if they're all in America.
right. And you know what, and I agree with you on that, but I think the chart, it was pretty much supposed to be like a starting point to get Israel to identify, well, get the descendants of the slave trade to identify with with um with Israel. But could I mean I mean, we know that the four corners mean four corners, you know, and I think they knew that too. But is
Mhm.
there any merit to Judah being mainly shipped to America, Ephraim sent to Mexico, or Issachar sent to Mexico, Ephraim to Puerto Rico, Levi to Haiti? I mean, is there? I mean,
How would those one question I've got for you, and hopefully you'll be able to answer, is we know that only 388,000, I think, is the rough estimate of uh, went to America, or what would be classed as the United States of. Um, how did and they ascribed that the fact that those are Judah. How did how were they all separated and went to the specific, each clan, each tribe went to the specific areas? How was that done?
um, well, they use Genesis 49 to pretty much base that idea from, and I haven't really studied the 12 tribes chart like that to be fluent in it. But it's something interesting that I would like to get to later. But I just think that it was a way to get people to identify with Israel and to
Mhm.
eventually go to the other countries like some of the camps are doing now. And I gotta admit, it was some of the camps online, some of the popular ones who, when I first learned out about, the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade being Israel, those camps were the ones that I said, I tried every art, not against them, but, just with my own research, trying to prove them wrong because it just didn't make sense to me. I'm like, how could we be Israel? And I never heard this before. And, I know some pretty, some pretty good see who I thought were pretty good see church people. And, they never spoke like that. And then, so, every argument that they came up with, I try to refute it on my own. And I just kept failing at the arguments that I was bringing. And eventually it was like, man, they're covering all my questions and they even debunking my responses, and I'm not even having any contact with them. So it was a strange thing to help me to get me to this point. You know what I mean? It wasn't like when I first. It took me actually 3 years of listening to them just to actually start thinking about it. How the way they were presenting it. So this isn't something that just came about. And then some of these apologetic groups that really helped me to start studying more in details because you know, just looking at YouTubes and talking to different camps, and even talking to finding out people that I've worked with in the past have the same beliefs. They weren't as knowledgeable as in, you know, learning from them to be able to have conversations with the BCA, the Black Christian Apologists, and you know those type of groups, because I've had discussions with them in lives before, and you know we went back and forth for like 6 or 7 hours. But hold on, LJ. In search of Yah, he asked some more questions. So you would have to look at the colonialism of all the tribes from around the world together to see if they were fulfilled. And then he said that is a stumbling block for a lot of people. The 12 tribes chart throws things up. I believe the places are true though. The natives that came via the migration to the east from Assyria became the Fiji and Tonga. They canoed over to populate the Americas. Still Negro people. You want to say something about that?
No.
Okay.
I've got no response at this moment in time, to be honest. I think I'm pretty much cooked.
Yeah, I know.
We've been going for. I could go. You know, we could start responding to that, and I think that might lead us down another hour or so in conversation.
So what time is it where you are?
It's 10 past midnight.
Oh man, so yeah, I know you got to get some rest because
I'm not bothered. It wasn't a problem for me to go for 4 hours, 5, 6, whatever. There was no problem. I was more worried about anybody that might be listening or might have or want to listen. That they're probably going to have to do that in maybe 2 or 3 goes. Just this
right.
one conversation, and we haven't even gone halfway through the verses that could be used, or you know, we've only the point of this was only the Bible. We haven't even touched on the historicity of anything. So, and we've gone 4 hours, and I think that's maybe not that I want to pull out. I'm
Yeah,
happy
but
to
it's about
carry on.
time.
But
Right, but
maybe
it's about time.
maybe it's time that we just pause it for a time, and come back to it at another time. It's been fascinating. It's been brilliant. I've enjoyed. It's my first online debate. Been a little bit nervous and probably slightly, I would say, underprepared in the fact that there was much that I haven't addressed that I probably would have liked to have done, but I just haven't known how to do it in a debate wise. It's easy for me to sit down and do research and have it all written out, but when I'm trying to use it in a conversation, it's slightly different. So there's
Right.
probably information that I would have liked to have stated that I haven't done, even in the verses that we've used. And I'll, like I say, I'll listen to this a few times and probably think, oh, why did you say that? Or, you know, you should have said this. Or so that response was terrible. You could have done this and could have done that. But that's something I'll learn. Like I say, is first debate. I've enjoyed it. I've learned. I've learned your argument, and I want to learn your argument. You know,
Absolutely.
I want to know what you why have you come to this conclusion? I have debates online, you know, not live like this, but over Facebook on the Trinity, and people say, "Oh, how did you come to that conclusion?" And I don't think that they're genuinely interested in how I came to it. They're just interested to know how I, you know, why I don't agree with them, and they're not really interested in what I've got to say. They just really
Right.
want to attack me and my belief. But I'm genuinely interested in why you have that belief.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
genuine interest, and yeah, we haven't even touched the Jews that are over in Israel. For me, it's not it's not I know that we could have addressed the salvation issue of Edomites, but which we haven't, and I would really, really like to do that with you at some point, going over Esau would be mine. If we have another conversation, as much as I would really like to continue on doing the color, I would really like to talk about Esau.
Okay. Sure.
Um, so I would hope that we would do this again at some point.
Yeah, I hope so too. You know, it was edifying for me, and I'm pretty sure somebody is gonna find it edifying either way. So
Yeah, hopefully somebody, whether they agree with me or they agree with you, either way, hopefully your argument or my argument has helped strengthen their belief, or at least
well,
challenged,
right, and
challenged
make them want to
the other
research
way.
more. Right, right, and
Yeah,
make them want to research more. So I
yeah.
want to thank everybody for watching. Your sister. I'm glad that she came and supported you. KB, who is Bo Battles, I'm glad that he came. Even Leader for Christ, even though me and her we have certain words, and
Yeah.
but she still came to support, and that's good. And in search of y'all, I'm just glad that he stayed around as long as he did to the end, because it just feels
Anybody
good.
that's listened to that for 4 hours is congratulations, well done. That's all I
Right,
can say.
yeah, yeah, and seek the truth, whoever that is. I never seen him before. I'm glad that he came too. So
Yeah.
let's see. And in search of Yah, he said, good conversation though. If you're sincere in learning whether we are Israel, you will find the truth. Never know, you may be you may be as well. So he said you might be on Israel as well. And he said to
I'm as white as they come. There's no way that there's no
well,
way. Uh, I don't care whether the Israelites are white, black, red, green, or orange. There's no way that I'm an Israelite.
well, like he said, you never know. So
Well,
it's and it's
I'll
and
have
it's
to
good
do
to see
a
that.
research. I'll
Right,
do
yeah, it's
research
good to
on
see.
my DNA.
Oh, DNA, don't get into that because I'm not a buyer in that one. But
Yeah,
LJ, man,
well,
I know it's getting late on your end and it's getting late on my end, and I got some more
yeah,
things I got to do. So it was good talking to you. We'll try to figure out on Facebook, how we'll continue if
yeah.
we will continue, and we'll just take it from there.
Did just quick question? Did regarding Bo Battle, did he stay about for long, or was he in and out?
I think he was in and out. And
Yeah,
the last time he commented was at 4:27. But it seemed like he came in pretty early,
right,
around 3:20. So yeah, he was around. He was around for some time too.
right, okay. It, like I said, I was blind on that, so I couldn't see anybody in or out. But I was just interested because I know that he's one that that I've or that actually the three of us have talked online together. So I've talked to Bo often, and I've talked to the two of you together. So yeah, I was glad that he came in.
Yeah, and what I learned how to do next time is try to figure out how to pull the comments up so we can see the comments as the live goes on. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
that right there would be interesting as well. So.
yeah. Okay. Well, it was like I say, it was a pleasure to have gone through all of that with you.
Same here, LJ, and we'll be in touch. All right.
Yeah, will do. Okay.
All right.
Catch
Talk
you
to you
later.
later. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.
All righty, there you have it. G Checker, this is my first live. I don't know how many more I want to do, but this dialogue did go well. So if we can have more fruitful conversations with other proclaiming Christians, I'm open to it. In search of Yah, shalom to you, brother, and everybody else out there, shalom. See you later.